Good afternoon on the East Coast at this high noon hour. Of course, good morning on the West Coast. I'm Robert McNeely. A joy to be with you at RSBN Live. We are awaiting President Trump to meet with the Norwegian Prime Minister today. This is the 13th foreign leader that President Trump has welcomed to the White House. And of course, it was anticipated that the president, nearing that 100-day mark back in the White House, will be taking his first international trip to either Saudi Arabia or the United Kingdom, as both kingdoms' leaders have invited President Trump and our wonderful First Lady, Mrs. Melania Trump. But of course, President Trump will be traveling for the funeral of His Holiness Pope Francis, which will be taking place on Saturday in Vatican City, something that really brings together everyone from around the world, friend and foe, and those who have dared challenge the United States. President Trump will be just steps away from those people, as he mentioned on Truth Social that he wants Vladimir Putin now of Russia to stop the bombings that have been happening in Ukraine. So that ceasefire seeming to break up, at least temporarily, President Trump being very clear and very stalwart in his message to both nations to stop the killing. We want peace through strength. He is not happy with Vladimir Putin's latest actions, and he wants peace to be done. Let's get this peace deal done, as President Trump did say. We also, as we are awaiting the Norwegian Prime Minister, President Trump celebrating this Earth Day week taking place at the White House. Also, a continuation of Easter celebrations. You might have mentioned and seen his Easter egg roll celebrations on Monday, but Earth Day happening this week, and the White House releasing just a number of different items that this president has championed. On Earth Day, we finally have a president who follows science. Under President Donald Trump, America is back, leveraging environmental policies rooted in reality that promote economic growth while maintaining the standards that have afforded Americans the cleanest air and water in the world for generations. Unlike the previous administration, which wasted billions of dollars in taxpayer money and virtue signaling with ridiculous gifts, and of course, remember the Paris Climate Accords, and really it was with Obama and Biden taking American money and redistributing it. So old school communism for you. But the Trump administration's policies are rooted in the belief that Americans are best stewards of our vast natural resources. No Green New Deal scam, no forcing EV mandates. And how ironic has it been in this discussion? I thought the people on the left really loved Tesla. They loved electric cars. And then you have some of them either vandalizing private property or Sharon Stone getting rid of her Tesla because Elon's been such a big bad wolf that's just simply trying to streamline the size and scope of this crazy government that we've seen so much fraud, waste, and abuse taking place. And again, that Doge team just doing amazing work nearly 100 days into office. We're fortunate to have someone like Elon Musk helping out President Trump. And as the president has reiterated, Elon is a great man, and he doesn't know how he has all the time to get this done with all of his other great companies, because he is focused on saving Western civilization, as is President Trump. But here are some key actions that President Trump is taking on the environment. He's promoting energy innovation for a healthier future, and by supporting cutting-edge technologies like carbon capture and storage, nuclear energy, and next-generation geothermal, the Trump administration is ensuring that America leads on this energy issue. We had the privilege of speaking with David Holt of the Consumer Energy Alliance just this week, and he talked about that. It has to be an above all selection process, not picking winners and losers. Again, remember back to Barack Hussein Obama with the Solyndra and that failed company, just something that got kickbacks from the government and ended up really being an empty facility. America leads in both energy production and environmental innovation with energy independence and producing the cleanest energy in the world. Remember, President Trump said on the campaign trail, we have liquid gold under our feet, and we might as well use that in order to make America great again. And speaking of gold, Colonial Metals Group, a great sponsor here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, Paul Stone, the CEO, wants to help shield your savings today. So do not delay. Scan the QR code now. Heed Warren Buffett's warning of placing this money into the stock markets. Not only doing that, and it might be properties, assets, perhaps a 401k or IRA as a way of beating inflation and preparing for your retirement. In addition to that, gold and silver, truly a necessity now in order to protect yourself financially. freegoldguy.com/RSBN. The best company out there is Colonial Metals Group to ensure these tangible metals in your accounts. Again, freegoldguy.com/RSBN. Thank you to Paul Stone and Colonial Metals Group for sponsoring us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. AngelPaste.com. Experience the miracle today. The vitamin B infused cream gets rid of your eczema, your dry skin, and will make you feel refreshed. They have other great options too. Being based in Spring, Texas, just off of the Gulf of America, they know a thing or two about those pesky mosquitoes being in that tropical environment. So they have a natural mosquito repellent in addition to an orange option. An immunity booster that is filled with vitamin C qualities, non-GMO, no chemicals, Christian-owned, they hire veterans. Experience the miracle today at angelpaste.com. And Kalshi.com, who will be the Canadian Prime Minister after the next election. Will it be someone from the Liberal Party or the Conservative Party or from the Bloc Party? Of course, there's many parties in Canada. So a great question for our friends up to the north, and maybe by the end of the year, it will be the 51st state. We've had our friend Ruby Dalla on, who was in that competition earlier for the Liberal Party, but did not make it against Mr. Carney. So he is now Prime Minister, but we will see what takes place by the fall for our friends north of our border. Who will be the Canadian Prime Minister? Trade and bet on that question among many others facing our country and North America and the entire world. So scan that QR code now. Kalshi.com/RSBN, Kalshi.com/RSBN, your go-to for everything trading and betting on the questions that matter most to you, the American people. Thank you for sponsoring us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. Now, moreover, the Biden-era administration brought us not only an auto pen, but brought us such a failure on the energy level. And as we reflect on that this week with Earth Day, Earth Week, and how to make things greener, but also not force mandates on you, the American people, this administration, the Trump administration, is sharing cleaner energy with allies, reducing global emissions, and creating American jobs, building on President Trump's first-term successes, where the U.S. led in the world in greenhouse gas emission reductions. And we spoke to many experts, whether it be Amelia Joy over at Nature is Nonpartisan, again, David Holt from the Consumer Energy Alliance, focused on bringing down our carbon footprint, but also the fact that we have made strides in this through the private and public partnerships under the Trump administration. Our friends in India, Vice President Vance was just there speaking with Prime Minister Modi, a great man, but they've been major polluters over there, going through somewhat of an industrial revolution. And part of that trade negotiation and those bilateral meetings focused on not doing any kind of Green New Deal there so that the United States does not get harmed in effect when we are trading with our partners. And look to our foes. The Chinese Communist Party overfishing near Alaskan waters, breaking all kinds of international treaties ever since they came into the World Trade Organization 25 years ago, thanks to President Bill Clinton and then Autopen Senator Joe Biden, who would clink his champagne glass with then the vice chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, otherwise known as Winnie the Pooh, who is now leading this global effort of an evil empire coming out of this Chinese regime. We have to stop them peacefully and patriotically, and that's why it's good to have someone like President Trump at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, as he's coming out now to greet the Norwegian Prime Minister. Let's go there live as he is about to say hello to the Prime Minister, and they are going to get their meetings underway. As Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store with President Trump, as this is the 13th international leader to meet with him in the West Wing of the White House. So as that's going underway, they'll have a lunch, some bilateral meetings, and we will likely have playback from their meeting in the Oval Office, which is likely to include many questions from the press, as we have gotten used to this administration truly being the most transparent in American history. And it goes without saying, we stand for this American flag. We salute those who serve, whether it be state, local, federal police, or any organization where they literally walk out the door with a uniform on. God bless them for what they do. President Trump meeting with several veterans who really have paid so much stress and strife defending this nation, losing limbs, but literally doing it with a smile on their face. Many talking about they would do it all over again to save Iraq, save Afghanistan, grant freedom to people all the way around the world, with asking for nothing in return, because they owed it as a duty not only in their Christian beliefs, but also for their country. And we have playback of that from the White House, yesterday's meeting with these outstanding veterans who will literally give it all, and many saying they would do it all over again. And we will go back to that in a moment, but it is an amazing thing to really reflect upon, and we could show you that video right now.
These are amazing people, great heroes. Unbelievable the job they do. It's really an honor to be with you, all of you. Incredible.
And that's why I stand for the flag, and that's why we here at Right Side Broadcasting Network are so passionate about our veterans and the greatness of this country, because truly the best volunteered to engage in a difficult situation post 9/11. And think about that for a moment. When you have all this going on in these college campuses, or Harvard's nonsense that we see with wanting everything, they want to eat their cake and insult the United States as well, while not protecting Jews on their campus. It doesn't make a lot of sense when you have veterans who are willing to defend this nation. Go back to World War II. What other civilization has gone into a nation, battled back, in almost all cases because we were attacked or pushed into a conflict, and then gave people back their land? It's an amazing thing to think about. Just reflect on that today, because quite frankly, every day we should have that mentality that we have on Veterans Day, on Memorial Day, honoring these people who are more than willing to defend us in combat. And they don't want to die for the nation, but they're willing to, and willing to live on with these scars from war. It's exceptional, and thank God that they have a commander-in-chief who deeply respects that. Thank you to our sponsors here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. Tax Network USA. Settle those back taxes today. Protect yourself from the IRS. Do not delay. Call today. 800-357-1415. That's 800-357-1415. Tax Network USA Incorporated. Visit tnusa.com/RSBN. Call 800-357-1415. Make sure to do that today, even after tax day. You could prepare for next year, or even the back taxes that might be on the back burner for you. Thank you to Tax Network USA Incorporated and freetrumpbook.com. The ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, former governor of Arkansas as well. His daughter, his successor, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, doing an extraordinary job in Arkansas, working with Secretary Kennedy as well to get rid of those seed oils. So West Virginia and Arkansas really leading on the MAHA movement. We hope that all 50 states adopt some form of it. But you can learn more about that agenda, or the MAGA agenda, or why President Trump ran in the first place, for your young patriots at home, stuff they might not be learning in school. The Kid's Guide to President Trump, or the Kid's Guide to the Courage of President Trump, among many other books that have Christmas themes, Easter themes, why the civil rights movement happened, what was women's suffrage, all those questions answered for your young patriots. Free Trump gifts for the kids at home or for that neighbor who just has their head in the sand. freetrumpbook.com. Get yours today. Thank you to Ambassador Mike Huckabee, I love saying that, and his team for freetrumpbook.com for sponsoring us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. And this week has been many reflections, of course, of His Holiness Pope Francis passing on Easter Monday and having that opportunity to say really goodbye in St. Peter's Square, but also with his Easter message, and very poignant to do that in such a manner. And God has an amazing way of really writing or painting a beautiful picture in that sense. And our thoughts and prayers again with the Holy See, as President Trump will be traveling to Italy, and specifically to Vatican City, the smallest country in the world that sits within the eternal city of Rome. So we look forward to that coverage come Saturday, and pray for safe travels for everyone going to Italy, the pilgrims who will be joining in St. Peter's Square with many, countless world leaders celebrating the life of Pope Francis. And he was someone who was controversial, to say the least. But we should all pray when someone does pass away. Something that has been bothering me the last few days, I've noticed on different social media sites, specifically Truth Social as well. Just think about this for a moment. Had some conversations with friends. Would you wish hell on your worst enemy? I don't think any of us would. But sometimes social media has a way of people just saying what's on their hearts, what's on their minds. And I can understand people get upset sometimes about a number of issues. This is a passionate field that we are all involved with, whether it be politics, pop culture, the news in general. But just mind you that I had issues that I agreed with Pope Francis on. I had issues that I did not agree with him on, especially when it came to certain climate activism that he wanted to instill into the church. Some messages were very confusing as well, with bishops, cardinals, even local priests having to clarify that with their communications team. And it was an era of confusion. There's no question about that. But honestly, would you wish the worst upon your worst enemy? I wouldn't. I mean, think about that. The idea of hell is eternity without God. So just my encouragement, be a little bit more nice on social media when it comes to those you might disagree with, one way or the other, because I would not want to wish that upon the worst enemy in my life. So I wish this Pope his eternal rest with our Lord and Savior, as I do for everyone, and hope that everyone does come to that, as President Trump is meeting with the Norwegian Prime Minister today. I'm sure to talk on many different things. We've had roughly 18 different countries, 34 at least, call the White House since the tariffs went into effect, and then President Trump putting a moratorium on many of them to focus on the Chinese Communist Party in recent days and the ways that they have really cheated the system. They've manipulated their currencies. They are intimidating Taiwan, who we have truly free and fair trade with when it comes to the chips in our phones, minerals agreements, things of that nature. And the Taiwanese people want to be free. So something to watch as we go into geopolitical politics over the course of the next few years. And President Trump has echoed at many of these press conferences, with several questions coming from the press, that we will have a good deal done with China as we did in the first term. That everything and anything is on the table, but peace is the future. He knows how to deal with someone like Xi Jinping, but he recognized he's tough. He is looking at the long game, 200, 300, 400 years down the road. That's what the Communist Party does in China. They rule with an iron fist. But President Trump has that focus to debate and deal with those people. We're going to toss it now live to the lunch with the Norwegian Prime Minister and President Trump.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to have the highly respected, the great Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Norway with us today, who, as you know, has been doing a fantastic job and truly respected throughout the world as a leader. And thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. And we're going to be having a meeting in the Oval Office in a little while where you'll be invited back and you can ask some questions. It's also a pleasure to have my friend who did such a good job at NATO, my great friend, right? So you really did. We started off, they had no money, and they ended up having a lot of money after we said, you got to pay up. But you did a fantastic job, and thank you very much. And I'm glad you're here. Glad we meet each other again under these circumstances. So we'll be meeting in a little while at the Oval Office, and if you have maybe one or two questions, we'll do it now, and after that we'll go to the Oval. Yes.
Mr. President, on Russia, do you still believe that Putin is serious about peace given the events overnight in Ukraine? And if that bombing doesn't end, are you considering new sanctions on Russia?
So we are thinking that very strongly that they both want peace, but they have to get to the table. We're waiting a long time. They have to get them to the table, and I think we're going to get peace. We want to save 5,000 young people. I used to say 2,500. I now say 5,000. We have, Mr. Prime Minister, we have about 5,000 young people a week that are dying in that ridiculous war. And, I started out because I didn't like all the money that we were paying, and then I realized how many people were dying. And that's by far the more important element right now. I'm saying we can save thousands of people. And I don't like that it takes long at all, but I think they both want to make peace. I do believe so. There's a lot of hatred there. There's a lot of very bad blood, a lot of distrust. But I think I hope we're going to get there for the sake of a lot of young people that are dying.
Mr. President, do you have a deadline for when the party?
I have my own deadline. And we want it to be fast. And the Prime Minister is helping us. He wants it to be fast too. And I think everybody in this, at this time in NATO, they want to see this thing happen. So we have a deadline, and after that, we're going to have a very much different attitude. But I think it has a very good chance of getting done.
Mr. President, what can Norway do to prove that they're an important ally to the U.S.? What can Norway do to prove
Just
that?
keep doing what they're doing. We have a very good relationship with Norway. Great leader, great people. I know many of the people in Norway, and it's truly it's an incredible country. So all they have to do is keep doing what they're doing, I think, is probably the best answer I can give. Yeah.
As you pointed out, the former Secretary General of NATO is here.
Yes.
Mr. Stoltenberg, how important is the NATO defense alliance, Mr. President? Is it sacrosanct from your perspective?
Well, it's a very interesting question. It's certainly very important for Europe, and I think without us it wouldn't be as nearly as powerful. And as the former Secretary General, who did a great job, can tell you, I played when I was there a very big role in making sure that NATO is funded by the 28, at that time they had 28 countries, including us, because many of the countries weren't paid, and they ended up being paid, you would say, and the Secretary General was very nice about it as far as I was concerned. Other presidents went in, they made a speech, and they left, and that kept going on, and in the meantime, they had no money. And the United States was paying far more than its fair share. You could say that they were paying, I actually said sometimes it looked like 100%, and it was unfair. And the two of us worked very well together, and we took care of the situation.
There are some
Mr.
President.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
The Norwegian statistics are showing that the U.S. actually has a trade surplus with Norway. Are you going to be looking into that and see which of the countries are actually in a trade surplus?
Yeah, well, with the United States, almost everybody has a surplus.
But not
It's really an amazing,
numbers.
it's an amazing phenomenon. No, there's a surplus of a couple of $2 billion I think you have with us. I congratulate you. That's very good. We got to get a little bit of that for ourselves, maybe. But they do have a surplus. Norway has a surplus.
Mr. President, in the current tariff situation, analysts have pointed out that the U.S. actually need allies. Do you consider Norway as a possible ally in the situation?
I think Norway's always been an ally. They've been somebody we've been very close to, very friendly with. Maybe more so now with me than other people, but I think Norway's always been a great ally, yeah. Norway's been a friend.
That's a very strange question, actually, because the U.S. is our lead ally, and we build on a relationship we will talk about now, Mr. President.
Yeah.
It's of high relevance, and I'm very happy that we have secure state and secure defense.
Right.
So this is a very strong tie.
But it was a question about ally in the tariff situation specifically.
Tariff situation?
Yes.
Oh. Well, that's we're talking about a little bit different subject then. We're talking about a different type of ally. No, in this case, he would be very much inclined to be an ally of Norway because he wants to make the best business deal possible. And Norway and the Norwegians are great business people. They're great traders. They're great, very smart nation, very well-managed nation, has been for a long time, and in particular now with this leadership. But we'll be talking about trade and other things, and I think we're going to come to a conclusion very quickly.
Mr. Prime Minister, I was wondering whether you think that Donald Trump, for his effort in Ukraine and otherwise, deserves to be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, I salute President Trump for having been taking very important initiatives to get this conflict towards an end which both parties deserve. We need to have a ceasefire, save lives, move towards something which is more secure for Europe, for the people concerned. And on that we work together. And I look forward to go into some details because we are at a critical moment. On that price, that is a committee taking care of that, which is completely working on its own terms, and I cannot comment on that.
Mr. President, a question on China.
But thank you very much for that question.
Can I ask you the question on China?
I like that question. Yeah, please.
A question on China. Can you clarify with whom the U.S. is speaking with China? They're saying it's fake news that trade talks are happening.
Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is. We may reveal it later, but they had meetings this morning, and we've been meeting with China. And so I think you have, Jeff, as usual, I think you have your reporting wrong. Thank you very much. We'll see you. We'll see you inside. Thank you.
Thank you, Press. Thank you. Everybody else. Thank you. Thank you. Keep moving, everybody. Keep moving.
And some great insight from that lunch with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Secretary Scott Bessent of Treasury, alongside President Trump as he is enjoying lunch with the Norwegian Prime Minister. And it's a great country, as President Trump said, very well assembled, a monarchy, and people that know how to take care of their finances as well. So a beautiful nation as well, and a great partner in all of this. When it comes to the restructuring of NATO, these European Union trade deals, it all comes together to have these great leaders coming and sitting down, talking it out with President Trump. So assume that we'll have some great feedback and commentary from the Oval Office meeting as well, which will be forthcoming, as he mentioned to the press there, that they will be in there in a few moments after that lunch. So we'll have playback of that for you as well. Thank you to Colonial Metals Group here at Right Side Broadcasting. Now, scan that QR code or go to freegoldguy.com/RSBN. Some great options for you as questions were happening in that luncheon with the Chinese Communist Party and what they plan to do. And President Trump saying they, and doesn't really matter who they is, but someone in his administration, high level, having further discussions with the Chinese regarding a number of different items, including the tariffs. So in the meantime, freegoldguy.com/RSBN, a smart thing for you to do to protect your assets. Thank you to Paul Stone and Colonial Metals Group, the best in the business, for sponsoring us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. We're going to go to a quick commercial break. Stick with us, and we'll see you back on the other end for an exciting day at the White House.
Welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network, your trusted conservative news outlet. At RSBN, we deliver the truth when the mainstream media falls short. Since 2015, we've proudly broadcasted every single one of President Trump's iconic MAGA rallies, bringing you the excitement and energy live before anyone else. By watching RSBN, you get an unfiltered front row view of the action on the ground. We interview the crowds to give a voice to millions of Americans just like you. We show you President Trump's speeches in their entirety, free from interruptions and censorship. We cover the stories that matter to you with the integrity and passion you deserve. Thank you for choosing RSBN as your home for America First News. Together, we stand strong, united, and informed, so join us and be part of the right side of history.
President Trump is keeping his promises and saving America. And your kids can learn all about it for free with a new Kids Guide to President Trump. This fun guide shows kids all the steps President Trump is taking to put America back on top of the world stage, including building a strong economy, protecting our borders, and negotiating trade deals. It's an exciting way for kids to learn about President Trump's outstanding leadership. Act now and get a free bonus guide, The Courage of the President. Order now at freetrumpbook.com. That's freetrumpbook.com.
Hey y'all, it's Silk from the Diamond and Silk Chit Chat Live Show. Look, don't forget to check me out right here on RSBN Network. Be sure to watch the show on Right Side Broadcasting Network, and I want you to support Right Side Broadcasting Network. Yes, it's imperative that you do so, okay? I look to see y'all soon. Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the next generation of energy drinks, Rev 7. It has no sugar and no caffeine. Instead, Rev 7 uses Go BHB. Go BHB is one of the body's primary ketones, and it provides the most efficient and clean fuel that your body needs. It also helps you stay energized all day with no crashes. Not only that, it produces 3 times more brain energy than sugar, which helps boost your memory, focus, and mental sharpness. It also helps reduce stress and helps balance your mood. Rev 7 does all that while being the best tasting energy drink ever. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% today. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7. For a limited time, you get our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. I drink Rev 7 every day, and I absolutely love it, and so will you.
Welcome back to Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. Thank you for joining us today as President Trump is in a luncheon with the Norwegian Prime Minister, his foreign ministers, and also Secretary of State Marco Rubio on hand with Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent, among other cabinet officials, to discuss bilateral agreements. And this meeting, very important, crucial, the 13th meeting with a foreign leader at the White House before President Trump prepares for his first international trip to Rome, Italy, specifically the Vatican, the Holy See, to pay his condolences and celebrate the life of Pope Francis, who passed on Monday. We had the opportunity to have an exclusive interview with Father Frank Pavone to not only talk about this papacy, but the next steps that take place in this just earlier this week. So we'll toss that to you now in case you missed it. We are joined now by Father Frank Pavone of Priest for Life. Happy Easter, Father. God bless you. Thank you for joining us today on Breaking
Easter.
News, and to notice that our pontiff, His Holiness Pope Francis, has passed on. Really a beautiful Easter message just yesterday. What do you think will be the legacy of a pope that truly had many firsts within the Catholic Church and within Western civilization and, throughout the whole world?
Certainly did have many firsts, and I had the privilege of meeting with him about 5 times in the context of my pro-life work. And, he was a confusing figure, and we can talk a little bit about that. But one of the things he constantly emphasized was God's mercy. And in the long run, there's a very important contribution to the work of the church that as we maintain the solid teaching of Jesus Christ, the discipline that is needed in any church community, obviously the gospel is a gospel of mercy. I head up one of the largest ministries for healing people after abortions. And the Pope knew about that work. I spoke with him about it. He encouraged me in that very, very strongly. as well as many other ministries of mercy that he advocated. It will go down, though, as a papacy of confusion, because although technically when you dig deep, and sometimes he had to be pressed to clarify whether what he was teaching was consistent with what the church has always taught, and in pressing him he would say, oh yes, we're maintaining the solid teaching, because he knows he can't change that as a pope. Nevertheless, so many of the things he said were confusing to people, and it caused quite a bit of division within the church. So I hope that now we're going to enter into a period of more clarity and healing.
And not to bring up a sore subject, but that happened to you with your works of mercy, your extraordinary work in the pro-life movement, very Catholic, very Christian, but you were laicized. Can you explain to maybe our non-Catholic viewers what that means, and what that means not only for your vocational work, but your daily duty as a Roman Catholic priest?
Well, most priests are assigned to a parish, for example, and they serve there, saying Mass for the people and so forth. I did that same kind of work when I was first ordained to the priesthood, but then I sought and received permission to devote myself fully to pro-life work. And I head up this group called Priests for Life, and it's not just for Catholics, it's interdenominational. And it grew and flourished. I've been leading it for 32 years, and it received the blessings of Pope John Paul II. I even worked over there with him for a while at the Vatican, received the blessing of Pope Benedict, and even the blessing of Pope Francis. But in the latter years of Pope Francis' time, some of the bishops who didn't like me and my work, some of them who, for reasons they would have to explain, because you and I know how solidly pro-life the Catholic Church has been, but nevertheless, they didn't like what I was doing, and they convinced Pope Francis to, as you say, to laicize. Now, that's a technical word. What it means is that a priest is told that he can no longer function publicly as a priest. Now, usually this is done because the person has done something very wrong and they're being punished for it. But in my case, it was a dispute over whether or not I could continue full-time working to save babies from abortion and heal those that have been wounded by abortion. And it's like, what in the world could be the reason not to do that? So that's been a long-standing dispute, again, just with some of the bishops who I believe just want to take control. They want to be in control of everything, whether it's fundraising or how projects are carried out, and so forth. So that led to Pope Francis making what I think was a very misinformed decision in regard to me. But I'm hopeful that now under a new pope, we can get that all squared away and reinstated.
Run us through the next steps of what will happen over the course of several weeks here, as the College of Cardinals will come together. They'll be in that Sistine Chapel, just where Vice President J.D. Vance was over his trip over the weekend, over Easter, and being really the last non-official meeting with a foreign leader with Pope Francis was our vice president. So how humbling to have that moment happen. But this Pope had many, many appointees, whether it be bishops or those who rose to the rank of cardinal. And roughly 2/3 of those will be deciding who the next Pope is. Do you have some concern about those like your voices, like Bishop Strickland's voice, that have been very traditional and very faithful to Catholic teaching, might not get that same voice to ear at the Vatican as sometimes it happened during the last papacy?
Well, what will happen next, the church protocol calls for 9 days, today being the first, of official mourning for the passing of the Pope. And during those days, special ceremonies will be held, and during towards the latter part of these 9 days, there'll be the actual funeral mass and the burial. And then, sometime shortly after that, the cardinals of the church will gather together in what is called a conclave, a secret meeting there at the Vatican, where they will deliberate and vote on who the next pope will be. And normally they're selecting someone from among that group of cardinals, although technically it doesn't have to be that way, but they could choose someone outside of the group of cardinals, but that's not normally been done. So then we will see how long it takes. Now, in terms of the politics of it, Pope Francis has appointed quite a few of these cardinals himself. But the good news is that doesn't necessarily mean that they think like he did. or that they would govern like he did. In fact, I'm very confident that we will see a shift, if you want to use political terms, a shift more towards conservatism in the church, more towards the middle, because these cardinals see what we see as well. They see the confusion over, acceptance of gay couples, for example, and even some confusion about whether Jesus is the only way to salvation. I mean, nobody can change that. That's the gospel truth. And yet the Pope has created some confusion about that. So I think that the next Pope is going to bring about a lot more clarity and heal some of the wounds that unfortunately have occurred under Pope Francis. I think voices like my own, that of Bishop Strickland, will feel more welcomed under the next Pope. Time will tell, but I'm very confident in that. And one of the issues here is really that we see this shift in American politics. Certainly, there's been a strong rejection of the transgender insanity and the woke insanity. This has happened in other countries too. There's a shift to the right. I think now it's going to overflow into the Catholic Church, and I'm looking forward to that.
That's a great point, Father, because we've seen that with the based thinking in a number of things. And Gen Zers specifically, it's being reported that so many are turning back to the Catholic Church, and especially in France, thousands baptized over the Easter Vigil and this past holiday. So do you think that there is somewhat of a revival happening, especially within the American church? Seems to be a balance sometimes of either the very traditional route or at least a turning back to, this is where God fits into my life and I have to respond to this calling. And it seems like younger people are doing that, whether they're in a Bible-based church or whether they are accepting Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. And I think the reason is it's rooted in human nature. We need truth and meaning just as much as we need food and oxygen. Truth and meaning are essential for us. And what has happened is the woke agenda rejects the very concept of truth. And young people are just not okay with that. It's like, this isn't abandoned. It's not like you're taking one or another position on different issues. It's that you're rejecting the foundation of every issue, is that there is such a thing as truth, the ability to communicate truth, to find it and to hold on to it. And the left, by rejecting that, reduces everybody into an isolated atom that is incapable of communicating or reasoning with anybody else. That makes life very, very unstable and uncomfortable. And I think that's part of the reason why we see exactly the phenomenon that you're describing. Because the scripture, whether you're talking about the scriptures, the liturgy, the clear body of teaching that the Catholic Church and other churches have, that gives a certain sense of meaning and stability. And our young people are thirsting for that. We're all thirsting for that.
It was really beautiful to see the Orthodox and the Latin Rite coming together to celebrate at some of those images at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Holy Land, and some different traditions there, but to see the concelebration take place. Do you see somewhat of a reunification happening in the West and throughout the world of maybe this idea of one holy Catholic and apostolic faith really coming back together? Are there movements that seem to be bringing us together because of how far left this woke mind virus has gone?
I think so. The unity within the church is something, and specifically, as you say, in the West, and unity with the Orthodox is something that Pope Francis was very explicitly talking about and working towards. It happens on several levels. There's theological dialogue that is constantly occurring. And then there's what my mentor, Cardinal John O'Connor of New York, who ordained me to the priesthood, said. He called it bialogue, living together. And today, I think the divisions are much more horizontal than vertical. What I mean is, you can look at vertically Catholic, Orthodox, Baptist, Presbyterian, whatever that category might be. But today, the differences are more horizontal. I will have more in common with a Baptist preacher than I might have with one of my fellow Catholic priests, precisely the division being over this woke agenda, being over the truth of the scriptures. You know, is this really solid truth on which we have to base even our public policy? And the culture wars bring us together in a new way. So I think that the unity that I believe will continue to grow is going to be among those who adhere to truth, including religious truth, and who have the courage to fight. I think that's a key dividing line here. If you're a coward, if you say you believe and then you're quiet about it when that truth is being attacked, who wants that? The people don't want that kind of, it's not leadership, first of all, and they don't want that kind of bad example. It's downright depressing, you know. But I think that the courageous truth tellers and truth believers are going to come more and more together, because we've got some battles on our hands. We're winning a lot of them. We got to continue to win.
Amen. And God is with us, Emmanuel, as Ambassador Huckabee putting that handwritten message from President Trump in the Western Wall. And I just think about him when you were so eloquently describing, Father, about those with courage and that Easter message dating back to Wednesday of Holy Week, when President Trump having so many wonderful pastors around him. It's great to see that, and sad when you compare the last administration and, you know, Franklin Graham, the great reverend from North Carolina, of course, his father a stalwart in the American church, really speaking on how sad it was just a few years ago to have this godless home, this American home that it should welcome God in. And thank God for this cabinet, this administration, turning to God to make America great again.
You know, I've been privileged to be among those pastors praying over President Trump on a number of occasions. And, you know, here's the beautiful thing. You got the left. You see how they're thrown into confusion and contradicting of themselves, because now they complain that, oh, President Trump is invoking Jesus in this prayer in the White House and this Easter celebrations. Oh, this is terrible. This is terrible. But these are the same people who try to say that he's a dictator, a Hitler. He wants to arrogate power to himself. Listen, if people want to complain about one of those things or another of those things, people have a right to complain. But you can't complain about both of those things at the same time, because someone who's acknowledging that Jesus is Lord is not claiming power for himself. He's doing just the opposite. And he's empowering the people to say, Jesus is my Lord, therefore no government tyrant can rule over my life. It's got to be either one or the other. And President Trump has made very clear where he stands. Jesus is Lord, not government, and not himself, and not any other human institution. Only God. And that, of course, is what our founders believed and what they based this country on.
Amen, amen, amen. I was listening to an Easter message from Bishop Robert Barron of Minnesota, and he had mentioned just that ironically the first evangelist ends up being Pontius Pilate because of the sign he put over Jesus at the crucifixion in Latin and Greek and Hebrew, the main languages at the time in the civilized world. And really it was in order to mock him. And of course we know the story, and we just recollected upon that amazing, heroic, merciful passion leading into Easter Sunday. The fact that Pontius Pilate inadvertently describes the truth as he's asking, what is truth? And okay, I see no guilt in him, but I will pass him. He is breaking your laws and your views to the Jewish community at the time. And this was the power structure, of course, with the Sanhedrin, among other Jewish powers. But amazing to watch that and reflect upon that inadvertently he does describe that Jesus is king, and that, you know, his kingdom, of course, is not of this world, but is over every other human creation from beginning to end.
Well, you know, that's where, too, I was commenting yesterday that Easter is the ultimate victory over the cancel culture, because Jesus wasn't crucified because of the good works he did. You know, as he challenged his enemies, he said, I've done many good works, why are you trying to stone me? And they said, it is not for your good works, it is because you commit blasphemy, making yourself equal to God. So Jesus was crucified because of what he said. He proclaimed the truth. Now, we live in a cancel culture. Fortunately, we're fighting back effectively against it. But you look at censorship, you look at lawfare, you look at a weaponization of government, you look at conservatives being kicked off off of campuses, even violently. And it's like, what's going on here? And President Trump comes along and beefs up freedom of speech for everybody, including the clergy. It's like Easter, by Jesus being raised from the dead, that is a vindication of every single thing he ever said or taught. The same is going to be true for all of us. We who speak the truth courageously, whether in politics, business, education, or anywhere else, are going to be vindicated. The cancel culture cannot win. And that is one of the key lessons of Easter.
Amen. Thank you, Father Frank Pavone. And just one more thought in regards to this upcoming morning of the Pope and the conclave to come. Do you think the church will go more in a younger direction, say like choosing someone like John Paul II, just given that with Benedict and Francis, relatively short papacies in the grand scheme of now this will be our 267th pontiff, I believe, since, of course, in succession of Peter's papacy, going all the way back to when Jesus walked this earth?
It very well could be. You know, John Paul II was only 58 when he was elected Pope. And of course, he had one of the longest pontificates. I wouldn't be surprised if they do that. But of course, time will tell. And we just hope that whatever the age of the new Pope, he is going to bring about more healing, more unity, more clarity of the faith. Because after all, that's the Pope's main job, you know, to teach clearly the faith so everyone can rally around it.
Well, thank you so much for your testimony, Father Frank Pavone. Happy Easter. Where can we find your latest work?
I am on social media at FR Frank Pavone on all the platforms, FR Frank Pavone. And our main website is endabortion.us.
Amen. Thank you for your mercy, for the great charitable acts that you commit in the name of God. And you do that with such clarity, with such joy. And it's wonderful to have you on Right Side Broadcasting Network. We look forward to speaking with you again very soon.
Looking forward to it. Thanks again.
God bless. Always a pleasure having Father Frank on to really clarify all of those big issues facing the church, not only this week, but the whole of the world civilization coming together to celebrate the life of His Holiness Pope Francis come Saturday. Thank you to angelpace.com for sponsoring us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. Experience the miracle today, whether it's the vitamin B that takes care of your dry skin or those orange immunity options filled with vitamin C. All of them are non-GMO, no chemicals, Christian owned. They hire veterans and they're in Spring, Texas, the Lone Star State. Experience the miracle today at angelpace.com. Thank you for sponsoring us at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. And we are joined today by Katie Zachariah, a Republican strategist who is looking forward to talking on many different topics with these first 100 days nearing this new administration. Katie, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So what are some of your top things, whether it's tariffs, whether it's the executive orders? What do you feel President Trump has done very well nearing this Tuesday mark of 100 days back in the White House?
Well, I think the better way to phrase the question, honestly, is what hasn't he done well? I think he has taken what Joe Biden absolutely dismantled of the United States, our Constitution, our border, our entire system. And President Trump has restored order. He is deporting illegals, much to the, pushing back of the judiciary. President Trump is still going forward with the mandate that we elected him for. He's making our cities safe again. He secured the border. I think we're down to the lowest border crossings we've seen historically in the near history. I think we're at the very lowest. He got us out of the Paris Climate Accords, the Green New scam. He got us out of the World Health Organization. I think he signed over 130 executive orders, which is a historic number for any president in their first 100 days. But it also shows exactly that he needed to reset this country. So 130 executive orders is just the beginning because we were in such bad shape. So I am so excited to be watching what he's doing.
Oh, and the feeling's mutual. Let's dive into that. Do you think these 130 specifically will really spur action legislatively? Because sometimes a president will put an executive order or action in place in order for Congress to move on something. Do you feel the Republican-led Congress has been bold and brave enough? And what do you see on the horizon for Congress to help support this president's agenda?
Yes, I think Speaker Mike Johnson is doing a phenomenal job at getting behind the president, getting behind the initiatives, and really saying we are going to support the American people's mandate in their vote for President Trump. So you take the executive order of the voting, right? He said we are going to say you have to have a voter identification that shows you're an American citizen to be able to vote in federal elections, so presidential and congressional. And there's going to be one day of voting. We're not going to have these voting weeks that are ridiculous. So President Trump signs this executive order, and then Speaker Johnson comes and supports that order with the SAVE Act, which is proof of citizenship as a form of identification, and we're going to go for these one-day voting. And this is also supported by the Fifth Circuit, the RNC v. Wetzel. The Fifth Circuit ruled that you can't have a long voting window. It's a 1 day for voting, otherwise it's unconstitutional. So they overturned a Mississippi statute that allowed for 5 days. So what we're seeing is the judiciary is in part working alongside the president and actually preceded the president's executive order on that. And then the president ruled, the president submitted the executive order, and then Congress stepped in and said, now we're going to support these with the SAVE Act. So when the system works well, I hope that we'll see the end of no voter ID and the end of these long windows of voting and restore our country back to what it should have been, voter ID and 1 day of voting, right?
It's common sense at the end of the day, and so much of this dates back to the Clinton administration with motor voter. And I even covered it when I was up in Alaska, when at my residence I had 3 or 4 different ballots arrive to me. And both sides of the aisle, being a very purple city in Anchorage, were concerned about local elections because of the automatic ballots coming out. I think something similar to what's happening in your golden state of California.
Yes. Yeah, we have Judicial Watch in partnership with Congressman Darrell Issa has sued in the San Diego area for voter ID and paper ballots and 1 day voting, right, to support the state election laws. So what President Trump did and what Speaker Johnson did are on the federal side, and each state should take their own steps to ensure that there's voter ID and 1 day voting and hopefully paper ballots, right? And what we're seeing with Darrell Issa and Judicial Watch is we are going to ensure that there's one ballot for every one voter and they vote on election day, and who they are saying they are, there's proof of that. And every single state across the country should be doing this alongside the federal executive order.
Now, do you think there will be a federal holiday for voting, say on election day? You can legally take that off. You can tell your employer, hey, I have to go vote. Very similar to the laws on the books. It goes back to civil rights. If you have to go pray or do something that's constitutionally protected, you can do that. But do you think we'll have a federal holiday similar to how Juneteenth has been brought up recently as now a federal holiday? It was once only in the state of Texas. But maybe see something like that so people really have full unbridled access to the polls as they already do, but just another layer so that the far left can't make any more nonsense up, like things that people can't eat or have water in line. I mean, the longest I've ever voted it's roughly 20 minutes and usually early, and still then I feel like I'm going in and out and I carry on with my day. But of course you have that narrative coming from the far left.
You do have that narrative. And I think in large part, we saw that in Arizona with Kari Lake's race in Maricopa County, where they started putting all this pressure on, okay, we're gonna eliminate the option of multiple day voting. So we're gonna make it incredibly difficult to vote. Actually, what you're saying is it's not difficult to vote. And if we had a federal holiday, there would be no excuses. people would take the time out of their day to go at any point during the day, not at one point, but lunch break, or they could take the evening and they go vote and then they go home, the end. And so President Trump has actually talked about a federal holiday for voting in the past, and I think that it would really be a nice mile marker alongside these executive orders on proof of citizenship and same-day voting. Hey, we're just going to give you a holiday to go vote, and so we don't have any excuses. You're absolutely right on that.
And let's shift over to education in America. We have Harvard now suing the Trump administration. This has a $53 billion endowment, and now they seem to be fighting over that $2 billion must be mine coming from the federal government. It is a private institution, and they do have freedom of speech, of course, but they cannot discriminate against Jewish students. We've seen that on their campus with what they've tolerated with people who have been pro-Palestine, pro-Gaza, but using violence in order to get their point across. It violates constitutional principles and the safety of students on campus. Do you think there's a tide that's changing for the way we educate people in our post-secondary institutions?
Yeah, and what we've seen is we've tolerated this. We tolerated this from 2020 to 2024. The president, Joe Biden, did not come out and speak firmly against it and really push back on the universities that were allowing this. They went all across the nation. We had it at USC, UCLA. Students at USC couldn't graduate because of these types of protests. And it's violence against a specific group of people. It's anti-Semitism, and it's being allowed on these campuses. So Harvard, I think, should lose their 501c3 status. They're taking a political position. So they should lose the ability to have a tax deduction. And I think once you put that to them, once you put that to any university, and quite frankly, any school, K through 12, if these schools are promoting DEI programs and or DEI-like programs, because a lot of them will kind of say, okay, we got rid of DEI, but we have this inclusion program that's just, a different name for DEI, they should lose the 501c3 status. So private schools, K through 12, and universities should risk losing this. I absolutely think that is the way to turn the tide, because money talks. And at the end of the day, these schools are interested in preserving their endowments, preserving their financial integrity. And so they will probably say, okay, we will not allow these protests, these anti-Semitism, and we will not allow any of these DEI programs that are actually quite abrasive and disturbing in terms of what they're perpetuating. So,
and do you think that will happen from the executive branch or the legislative branch, or does it have to be a combo of the two to remove that 501c3 status?
Yeah, I think it's maybe you give it the carrot or the stick. You propose, we are going to eliminate your 501c3 status within 30 days if you do not end these types of programs. And so maybe that comes out as an executive order. President Trump says, for any K through 12 and or university that's a private institution and enjoys the benefits of a 501c3 status and the tax deductible options that gives you, we will give you 30 days to get rid of these highly partisan, highly politicized programs that are indoctrinating students. And this is your window. If you don't get rid of it, we will revoke your 501c3 status. And I think you can have a program that goes and looks at these schools statewide and then also on a federal level to partnership. He had those 87,000 IRS agents, and he was talking about sending some of those to the border. Why don't we just reposition them and put them in these, to look at this 501c3 status and determine if they are in keeping with that kind of 30-day warning. I think this is something that should be done to bring universities and schools back to their roots, which is to educate children, not indoctrinate them.
In essence, the art of the deal. And we know President Trump, 100 days in, the art of the comeback, the most ultimate political comeback. Thank you, Katie Zachariah, Republican strategist and lawyer. We always enjoy your in-depth analysis, especially the legal analysis that helps our viewers at home. Look forward to, again, seeing you very soon on the network.
Thank you.
And President Trump, of course, meeting with Norwegian Prime Minister today at the White House. They're enjoying some lunch right now with staff from the great kingdom of Norway and, of course, our constitutional republic, the United States of America, with the best Secretary of State in the House. That is Marco Rubio, also Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who has really been crucial in all of this. And as Katie was mentioning, money does talk. So in these negotiations with tariffs, with realigning the global supply chain and different markets throughout the world, Treasury is essential to all of this. And this dates back all the way to Alexander Hamilton as our first Treasury Secretary, wanting to use tariffs in order to bring people to the table. And speaking of your financial future and everything that can protect you in these sometimes uncertain days, although, as President Trump said on True Social, grocery prices going down, gas prices going down. So stick with the program because it's all going to turn into a more robust economy. But even with all of that happening in the world, defend yourself with gold and silver. The best company to do that with is Colonial Metals Group. And Paul Stone, the wonderful CEO of this organization, wants you to scan that QR code now to shield your savings, or by going to freegoldguide.com/RSBN. A great way to learn how, and with no obligation, patriots like Judge Jeanine Pirro endorsing this very company as the best in the business. So whether it's properties, assets, 401ks, IRAs, or whether you have that pesky Chinese Communist Party on your mind with all of their war games and the tariffs they're throwing at Taiwan and the United States, among others. In fact, I just got a notification that they've summoned the Kenyan officials to China to figure out something, because President Trump and the Western world really restructuring all of this to benefit our countries against their manipulation of their currency, the yen. The best way to defend yourself against all of this, gold and silver. Thank you to Colonial Metals Group for sponsoring us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. And we'd like to also thank Kalshi, who will be the Canadian Prime Minister next year. Will it be someone from the Liberal Party, perhaps the Conservative Party, or another party? You can do those bets and trade live now by scanning that QR code and going to kalshi.com/RSBN. A great question facing our North American continent, or even culture, sports, whatever it might be. Kalshi's getting you to bet on the most important issues of our time. KALSHI.com/RSBN. Trade live now. Thank you for sponsoring us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. And we are awaiting the next meeting, President Trump in the Oval Office with the Norwegian Prime Minister. They're enjoying lunch over the last few moments here, discussing all of these crucial issues that is facing the United States and our country. So this will actually be a crucial meeting when it comes to the future of NATO, also what's happening with the European Union as well. So it is fantastic to watch all of that in real time as we near, on Tuesday will be the 100-day mark of President Trump and the Trump administration announcing, if you're excited for rallies, they're going to Michigan to celebrate 100 days back in office. And thank God for that, because what a relief it truly has been to have President Trump back at the helm, fighting for you, the American people. I'd like to focus as well this week, as we celebrated Earth Day, having some great interviews with Amelia Joy from the Nature is Nonpartisan, and also David Holt of Consumer Energy Alliance, because a lot of times the left will throw out that it's the Republicans who don't care about clean air and water. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, when it comes to energy conservation and when it comes to 21st century solutions to the United States being the best at clean air, clean water, and the future of this great nation, at the same time throwing out Barack Hussein Obama's and Autopen Joe Biden's plans for this redistribution of wealth. In fact, let's just call a spade a spade. Those two, they were communists. They wanted to literally take Keynesian economics, redistribute it, and then help everyone else with their industrial revolution. And I'm sorry, too damn bad. We did it back in the 19th century. We don't owe anyone else anything. Can you imagine a world without the United States? I sure can't. And President Trump is again putting this nation first. He's doing this by championing the sound forest management, which has been rejected by so many administrations. And go back to the first administration. Even Governor Gavin Newsom, who's been all over the place. At least I can give him credit trying to build free speech with his podcast. I guess because he's sick of being governor of California and he's failed at that job. So now he wants to be a podcast host. Well, it's great to see because at least he wants to talk about these different items. He credited President Trump saying promises made, promises kept with those wildfires in Northern California back during President Trump's first administration. And Governor Newsom saying that California failed in its sound forest management. So things to look at when you are electing local and state officials. The Trump administration's proactive forest management plan and policies protect America's forecast. They reduce catastrophic wildfires and promote sustainable land use. By streamlining these regulations and expanding responsible logging, President Trump is safeguarding millions of acres of forest land, improving wildlife habitats, and supporting rural economies at the same time. Something crucial to do to make sure that you can still conduct your life, you can still afford things, and not have to suffer with EV mandates and the ridiculousness that is. And think about this with Tesla. So because the right believes in freedom of speech, those true liberal values that the Democrat Party once believed in, going back to JFK in the 1950s and 60s, now it's been hijacked by people like AOC and Bernie Sanders, who want to mandate everything on you. I thought they were for green energy. I thought they liked Tesla. But now because this great man, Elon Musk, this great innovator, a defender of Western civilization, wants to save money and streamline the size and scope of the federal government with President Trump. Oh, now, therefore, you can't have private property. You get your Tesla keyed or kicked in. And I mean, I've been enjoying these videos, as silly as they are. These people actually think that they won't be recorded. Teslas have something like 9 cameras on them, so you will be recorded, you will be prosecuted. And as Attorney General Pam Bondi has done, you've seen some cases where people will face those max penalties for attacking your private property. So what a change in the political environment that the right side of history now enjoying Tesla and wanting to purchase these cars. But when you give people that freedom of choice, that's what it's all about, whether it's a gas or oil or the clean coal, whatever those options are, nuclear. People don't want to be mandated to have to do this or that. They want options, and it costs less when you let the capital markets determine that instead of government having its far-reaching overreach, as we've seen in past Republican and Democrat administrations in modern years. President Trump is ending the forced use of paper straws. Something that I'm always so confused by is when you have these paper straws that literally melt in your drink, but you might get a big plastic cup. So if you look at it, they claim that it's saving the turtles or whatever it might be, and I'm all about reducing plastic, but why would you give me this big, huge cup of plastic and then have a paper straw that doesn't even work? It makes no sense. Not only are paper straw mandates flawed in their alleged scientific backing, but they're also bad for humans and the environment. According to a new report, paper straws contain dangerous PFAs. These are considered forever chemicals. They're linked to significant long-term health conditions that infiltrate the water system because they're not biodegradable. They literally, you can feel them melting in your mouth, and then you wonder, what am I consuming? They also have found that producing paper straws can have a large carbon footprint and require more water than plastic straws for approximately zero environmental impact. Again, common sense, Maha and MAGA. And something that is common sense for you to do today is reach out to Tax Network USA, because they are great patriots who are experts in property taxes, state and federal taxes as well, those pesky income taxes. Maybe those will be ultimately eliminated. Many people moving to states like Florida and Tennessee where they don't have those. TNUSA.com/RSBN. Settle those back taxes today. Protect yourself from the IRS. 800-357-1415. Yes, it's 800-357-1415. Tax Network USA Incorporated. TNUSA.com/RSBN. Thank you for sponsoring us here on the right side of history. And just to dive more into the green agenda for President Trump, truly a conservationist agenda, a free speech agenda, wanting you to make those decisions what's best for your health and for your family. President Trump is cutting wasteful regulations that stifle innovation and raise costs. Actions like pausing restrictive emissions rules for coal plants and revising the National Environmental Policy Act implementation have accelerated responsible energy and infrastructure projects while maintaining these rigorous environmental standards. So this is saving American families thousands of dollars annually on energy bills and proving that a strong economy and a healthy environment do go hand in hand. They shouldn't be separate. In fact, who are the greatest violators of environmental policies on a global basis? It's China, and they have the furthest far left communist policies that cost more and more money on a daily basis than anywhere else in the world. And they keep pumping plastics into the Pacific Ocean. They keep using their facilities and their factories, building several every week. And it turns the environment into really a cesspool. I've never gone to China myself, but I've talked to congressmen, I've spoken to friends who have toured it, and just the smog that's over Beijing. It's not good for anyone. And my former congressman from the 6th District of Illinois, someone I actually had interned for in college, said that he came back to the United States while in office and kissed the ground, thanking God to be an American and that he would never, ever go back to the communist nation of China. President Trump is protecting public land, something that the great conservation president Teddy Roosevelt did back in the day. The Trump administration has prioritized access to federal lands for energy development while ensuring responsible management. Now, by opening more federal lands and waters for oil, gas, and critical mineral extraction, the United States is strengthening energy security and is leading on these very issues by reducing reliance on foreign resources. Simultaneously, these investments in conservation, such as $38 billion in clean water infrastructure during President Trump's first term, continue to safeguard America's natural heritage for future generations. So you can go out there to those mountain states and really take in all of those wonderful national parks, places like Zion or even the Grand Canyon. I love it myself. It's really great to reflect and hike in these vast reservoirs of God's natural beauty, and you just see the creativity out west along and among other places in this great country. President Trump is pushing back on unfair trade practices that harm the environment and undercut United States producers and exporters. For years, foreign countries have taken advantage of the United States, whether that was with Bill Clinton or George W. Bush, Barack Hussein Obama. Of course, they really took advantage during the Autopen presidency. This president will no longer tolerate it at the expense of American workers and the environment. So deforestation in Brazil is at a 15-year high. China's unfair, harmful fishing practices, especially along the Alaskan coast, flood the global market with illegal fish and deplete stocks, and Mexico fails to deter illegal fishing, all while enjoying massive trade deficits with the United States and contributing to global environmental degradation. And we know even that ridiculous just dumping the waste into Imperial Beach, California, coming from the Mexican government. They need to get their act together very quickly, or there will be consequences. It's just unbelievable to see how these nations took advantage of this country without President Trump at the helm. And as he's mentioned multiple times, it's the people who sat at that Resolute desk or another desk within the Oval Office who screwed up. And this president is fixing all of it with his great team surrounding him in the cabinet. President Trump cracking down on China, the most prolific polluter in the world. According to Reuters, China is responsible for the most ocean plastic per year with an estimated 2.4 million tons, about 30% of the global total. By imposing tough trade measures and promoting American manufacturing, the administration is reducing reliance on China's high pollution industries. ensuring the U.S. leads by example with cleaner production and responsible global stewardship. It just has to be done. President Trump is protecting wildlife as well by pausing certain wind projects. President Trump is recognizing wind turbines' detrimental environmental impact, particularly on wildlife, which often outweighs its benefits. And I had the privilege, one of the greatest moments I remember being involved in politics was at a Turning Point USA event in West Palm Beach, Florida, and we had people speaking on the amazing successes of the first term dating back to right before Christmas 2019. And Laura Ingraham introduced the late, great Rush Limbaugh, who introduced his friend, the President of the United States. This was just prior to him receiving the Medal of Freedom. Of course, our First Lady, Melania Trump, putting that around Rush Limbaugh's neck. And we are so grateful for the memory of that great man, because without Rush Limbaugh, you would not have people like Sean Hannity on the radio or with a primetime television show. Same here at Right Side Broadcasting Network. Without Rush Limbaugh, you would never have what we're able to do here, the new media, bringing you unbridled access as your go-to live desk for all things President Trump, Vice President Vance, also the 119th Congress, but also to push back against the mainstream woke mind virus that has taken over a lot of media dating back many years. If it wasn't for the legend, Rush Limbaugh, many of us would not have this platform that we do today. So God bless your memory, sir, as I pray for his soul often, a man who loved this country, a man who loved President Trump. And in this speech where he introduced President Trump, the president speaking on these wind turbines and how they're bird killers. And so true. If you go through places like Indiana, the crossroads of America, you see these go for miles and miles, and these things can't be recycled. So wind energy, although an option, is not perhaps the greenest energy, because you literally cannot recycle them when they break or where they're done being in use. Look at Texas, where they had a horrible storm and it froze over, and people literally did not have energy or a way to heat their home. And this is the oil and gas land of Texas. Just amazing. It's great to have common sense back in the White House at the end of the day. Thank you to our sponsors here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. FreeTrumpBook.com for those young patriots at home. All sponsored and brought to you by the United States Ambassador to Israel. And that's former Governor Mike Huckabee of Arkansas. His successor, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, his daughter doing a great job at the helm of governing Arkansas as well, that great Razorback state. But if you want the free Kids Guide to President Trump or the Kids Guide to the Courage of President Trump, among other questions like civil rights, how did that happen? How did that come to be? Why did Democrats filibuster that? And why did it take 2/3 of the vote coming from the vast majority of Republicans in Congress in order to push that legislation through? Or women's suffrage and how that came about in the 1920s. All those questions your young patriots might have and don't necessarily learn in school, FreeTrumpBook.com can provide all of that. So this is a great stocking stuffer if you're looking to jump ahead on your Christmas shopping, or if there's a birthday around the corner, or if you simply have a neighbor who has their head in the sand and does not want to pay attention to political changes or modern history in the United States. FreeTrumpBook.com is the go-to. All you have to do is pay for shipping and handling. Thank you to Ambassador Mike Huckabee and his team for providing us FreeTrumpBook.com and sponsoring us on the right side of history. And we have President Trump meeting with the Norwegian Prime Minister today. And President Trump will have some questions with him from the press coming from the Oval Office. Of course, we saw earlier some of those questions being answered during a luncheon in the West Wing. So this will be an interesting one really to develop, because this is the 13th leader coming to see President Trump at the White House, and very geopolitically smart strategy in order to address what's happening in Europe and NATO, and really trying to change for the better a supply chain system that has really not benefited the United States. Well, we can go now to, we had an exclusive interview earlier this week with the communications director of Nature is Nonpartisan. So touching on these very issues that I was just discussing, Amelia Joy working hard on a bipartisan nature to make America green again, healthy again, and also sharing why President Trump's administration has been so strong in these efforts. We'll toss that there now. With Amelia Joy, she's the communications director of Nature is Nonpartisan. Thank you for joining us, and happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day. Thank you so much for having me.
Now talk to us about your great work, because it's so interesting that conservatives and specifically the Republican Party in modern times seem to be the party that's against the environment, or that's what you hear from the mainstream narrative or the mainstream media. But how are you working to really build up the idea that everyone wants clean air, clean water, and loves Mother Earth?
Yeah, you're exactly right. The right has kind of been portrayed as the enemy of nature, but that couldn't be further from the truth. When we talk to Americans, about 90 to 95% across the political spectrum agree that we, like you just said, need clean air, need clean water, need to protect our wildlife and endangered species, need to make sure our communities can recover from natural disasters. And when we think about Earth Day, the very first Earth Day was in 1969, and it was started in a bipartisan fashion. It was started by a Democratic senator and a Republican representative who decided that we needed to draw the nation's attention to the environment and to the lack of environmental protection that was happening in this country. And so on that first Earth Day, about 20 million Americans across the country gathered and rallied around Mother Earth and the importance of nature. But today, only about 40% of Americans identify as environmentalists. But like I said, when you talk to them about the issues, we can all agree on the need to come together to protect the environment. And so this Earth Day at Nature is Nonpartisan, we're working on doing just that and having the difficult conversations across the political spectrum and talking to people who maybe we disagree with them on everything else, but we can agree that we need to protect nature. We can find common ground in the fact that we both love going on hikes. Maybe you both like skiing. Maybe you both like going to the beach and swimming in the ocean. And you want to make sure that our kids and our grandkids can be able to do that too. So this Earth Day, doing more than just posting a picture of your favorite memory outside, but talking about ways that we can actually protect our environment for generations to come.
That's all of the above for me, especially those North Georgia mountains. Nothing better to hike on a beautiful Saturday morning. But let's dive into that. What is on the horizon legislatively in Washington, D.C., or even from the Trump administration that might bring together this bipartisan hope to protect nature?
Yeah, we're working with the Trump administration on a nonpartisan package to protect the environment. We're calling it Make America Beautiful Again, very Trumpy. And so working across the aisle to bring all of the right players to the table to create environmental policies that transcend partisan politics. Over the last 30 years, you've seen presidential administrations do environmental policy in a way that's so partisan that when a new administration comes in, all that is left for them to do is to spend the next 4 years undoing everything that the previous administration did. And especially on an issue as long-lasting as the environment, in 4 years or even 8 years, if the president has 2 terms, that's not long enough for environmental policy to have any kind of real impact. And so in order to keep this out of the political fray and stop using nature as a political football, we need to bring all of the groups to the table and have bipartisan conversations and make decisions across party lines, compromise with one another, and create environmental policy in a way that can outlive the next election cycle, can last for longer than a change in party leadership, but can actually preserve the environment and conserve our natural resources for future generations.
Vice President J.D. Vance is actually in India, part of his trip overseas, coming from Italy as well. India, a great friend of ours, but going through somewhat of an industrial revolution as we once did in the 19th century, and they are big polluters on the global scale. Even worse, you have the Chinese Communist Party dumping plastics into the ocean, and they have shown that they not only care or do not care about human rights, but they also do not care about the environment. They've done overfishing along the North Pacific and especially near Alaskan waters, especially during the last administration. Do you foresee a united front of Republicans and Democrats coming together so that during these trade talks and during the tariff battles, that this conversation might be able to get around what China and India and other countries are doing, because some of them are much worse polluters than the United States?
I do see it being a part of the conversation, but more importantly, I think that over these first 100 days of the Trump administration, it's been made very clear that this is an America First administration. And so we're taking care of ourselves first. We're setting an example here at home that the rest of the world can follow. And so when we talk about environmental policy, let's fix ourselves first before we start worrying about the rest of the world. It would be great if India and China and these nations around the world could pollute less. But the United States also needs to pollute less. We need to make sure that our natural grandeur here at home that inspired our founding fathers and inspired the cowboys as we pushed west so many decades ago is here to inspire future generations. And so let's have the talks here and get ourselves straight when it comes to environmental policy, and then we can worry about the rest of the world in a little bit.
Makes sense with the America First policy. And speaking of the history of this great country, that Rough Rider, the President of the United States back in 1901 to 1909, Teddy Roosevelt, a great conservationist, and without his amazing work, we wouldn't have the national parks, we wouldn't have this great land of ours, especially out west in the mountain states, really preserved for our viewing and to really take in nature. We've seen this administration bring things like the Alien Enemies Act and the Monroe Doctrine into practice once again. Recent administrations would ignore the past, but not this group. Do you think that they'll take inspiration from the Roosevelt administration into modern conservation efforts?
I certainly hope so. Teddy Roosevelt is known as the conservation president. And during President Trump's first term, he already started to reestablish America's conservation legacy with the Great American Outdoors Act. And so I know that it's something that he's passionate about. It's something that this administration is passionate about. Secretary Doug Burgum, EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, they're all on board with reestablishing that conservation legacy and bringing back that part of patriotism, because caring about our environment really is something that's patriotic, and it puts America first, and it preserves our natural beauty and conserves our natural resources. And so taking inspiration from Teddy Roosevelt, the arch on the entryway to Yellowstone National Park, it's called the Teddy Roosevelt Arch, and it says, "For the betterment and enjoyment of all people." And that's the purpose of our natural parks and our public lands, is for the betterment of American society, but also for the enjoyment of the people. And so taking action like expanding hunting and recreation access on our public lands, and preserving and conserving our national parks for future generations, and making sure that our kids and our kids' kids and their grandkids can experience the natural beauty of this country is a patriotic thing to do.
A noble mission for sure. Amelia, where can we find the great work of Nature is Nonpartisan?
You can go to naturesnonpartisan.org, and then we're also on all of the social media platforms, so hopefully having some updates very soon. And if you're interested in getting involved, you can sign the pledge, and we'll have some activist resources coming very shortly as well.
Amelia Joy, the communications director for Nature is Nonpartisan. A joy for us to be with you today at Right Side Broadcasting Network, on the right side of history that clearly cares about clean air and clean water. Happy Earth Day to you, and thank you for fighting for what matters most in this country.
Happy Earth Day. Thank you for having me.
Thank you to our sponsors here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live, which brings you all of this unbridled access and in-depth analysis with great interviews like Amelia Joy from Nature is Nonpartisan's Colonial Metals Group. Paul Stone, a great CEO of this outstanding company. And you've probably seen many of the interviews as he comes on a regular basis to talk about how important it is to have gold and silver as part of your repertoire. And whether it's properties, assets, 401ks, or IRAs, all good to have in your portfolio, but gold and silver really crucial and essential regardless of who's in power. So Scan that QR code now, shield your savings today, or go to freegoldguide.com/RSBN. freegoldguide.com/RSBN. Heed the warning of Warren Buffett, along with other billionaires who are putting their money into stocks, but also gold and silver. Gold has gone up over 7,000% since 1971, when the Nixon administration went off of the gold standard. So something really great to do. And with this no obligation guide, you'll find out just how to do that. freegoldguide.com/RSBN. Your go-to for everything gold and silver with the best company in the business, Colonial Metals Group. We look forward to having you scan that QR code now, get that no obligation guide. And with any questions you might have, Paul Stone is sure to answer that with his amazing team. Thank you for sponsoring us here on the right side of history, Colonial Metals Group. And there is a live look now of the entrance to the West Wing, and in the distance on the White House campus, the Eisenhower Building. So when you hear something stated from the White House or a White House resolution, it's likely actually coming from the Eisenhower Building, as that's where most of the staff does work. The West Wing, beautiful, ornate, but rather simple, traditional office space that has the senior executives within the administration working around the president and, of course, the Oval Office. But most of the staff at the White House and in executive government have their offices there in the Eisenhower Building, including on that second floor, if you could see it there, is the old Secretary of War's office that is overlooking the Oval Office and the West Wing. And of course, that is now Vice President Vance's official ceremonial office, and it perhaps is one of the most beautiful on the entire campus. He can enjoy the balcony to oversee the West Wing and the White House itself, as we can oversee the beautiful Auburn University. Of course, RSBN is home in the city of Auburn, and we love it here. It is truly the loveliest village on the plains, and that is such a great shot from Toomer's Corner, where you can enjoy some lemonade and memorabilia from the premier campus at the SEC. It just matters more down here, so we love being part of the Auburn community in more ways than one, as President Trump is currently meeting with the Norwegian Prime Minister. And they are, I'm sure, talking about bilateral agreements, and then also NATO, the European Union, and how trade in the 21st century will be restructured to really serve that global supply market chain, to strengthen the American dollar, and also in turn to help strengthen the Norwegian country, a really great country, good people, and its monetary wealth really protected. The Scandinavian and Nordic countries have a wonderful way of doing just that, especially Norway, as President Trump mentioned during the luncheon, that it is a well-structured country and they know how to protect their finances. So this will be a robust discussion with the Prime Minister, and we'll see in the Oval Office what else they come up with to share with reporters of both Norway and also the United States of America. In case you're just tuning in now at 1:37 Eastern, you might have missed the luncheon from earlier where President Trump did answer some questions from the in-town press pool. So we'll toss that there now to the West Wing, where President Trump was enjoying some lunch with the Prime Minister of Norway.
Thank you very much. It's a real honor to have the highly respected, the great Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Norway with us today, who, as you know, has been doing a fantastic job and truly respected throughout the world as a leader. And thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. And we're going to be having a meeting in the Oval Office in a little while where you'll be invited back and you can ask some questions. It's also a pleasure to have my friend who did such a good job at NATO, my great friend, right? So you really did. We started off, they had no money, and they ended up having a lot of money after we said, you got to pay up. But you did a fantastic job, and thank you very much. And I'm glad you're here. Glad we meet each other again under these circumstances. So we'll be meeting in a little while at the Oval Office, and if you have maybe one or two questions, we'll do it now. And after that, we'll will go to the Oval.
Mr. President, on Russia, do you still believe that Putin is serious about peace given the events overnight in Ukraine? And if that bombing doesn't end, are you considering new sanctions on Russia?
So we are thinking that very strongly that they both want peace, but they have to get to the table. We're waiting a long time. They have to get them to the table, and I think we're going to get peace. We want to save 5,000 young people. I used to say 2,500. I now say 5,000. We have, Mr. Prime Minister, we have about 5,000 young people a week that are dying in that ridiculous war. And, I started out because I didn't like all the money that we were paying, and then I realized how many people were dying. And that's by far the more important element right now. I'm saying we can save thousands of people. And I don't like that it takes long at all, but I think they both want to make peace. I do believe so. There's a lot of hatred there. There's a lot of very bad blood, a lot of distrust. But I think I hope we're going to get there for the sake of a lot of young people that are dying.
Mr. President, do you have a deadline for when the party?
I have my own deadline. And we want it to be fast. And the Prime Minister is helping us. He wants it to be fast too. And I think everybody in this, at this time in NATO, they want to see this thing happen. So we have a deadline, and after that, we're going to have a very much different attitude. But I think that has a very good chance of getting done.
Mr. President, what can Norway do to prove that they're an important ally to the U.S.? What can Norway do to prove
Just
that?
keep doing what they're doing. We have a very good relationship with Norway. Great leader, great people. I know many of the people in Norway, and it's truly it's an incredible country. So all they have to do is keep doing what they're doing, I think, is probably the best answer I can give. Yes.
As you pointed out, the former Secretary General of NATO is here, Mr. Stoltenberg. How important is the NATO defense alliance, Mr. President? Is it sacrosanct from your perspective?
Well, it's a very interesting question. It's certainly very important for Europe, and I think without us it wouldn't be as nearly as powerful. And as the former Secretary General, who did a great job, can tell you, I played when I was there a very big role in making sure that NATO is funded by the 28, at that time they had 28 countries, including us, because many of the countries weren't paid, and they ended up being paid, you would say, and the Secretary General was very nice about it as far as I was concerned. Other presidents went in, they made a speech and they left, and that kept going on, and in the meantime they had no money. And the United States was paying far more than its fair share. You could say that they were paying, I actually said sometimes it looked like 100%, and it was unfair. And the two of us worked very well together, and we took care of the situation.
There are some Mr. President.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
The Norwegian statistics are showing that the U.S. actually has a trade surplus with Norway. Are you going to be looking into that and see which of the countries are actually in a trade surplus?
Yeah, well, with the United States, almost everybody has a surplus.
But not
It's really an
Norwegian numbers.
It's an amazing phenomenon. Now, there's a surplus of a couple of $1 billion I think you have with it. I congratulate you. That's very good. We got to get a little bit of that for ourselves, maybe. But they do have a surplus. Norway has a surplus.
Mr. President, in the current tariff situation, analysts have pointed out that the U.S. actually need allies. Do you consider Norway as a possible ally in this situation?
I think Norway's always been an ally. They've been somebody we've been very close to, very friendly with. Maybe more so now with me than other people, but I think Norway's always been a great ally, yeah. Norway's been a friend.
That's a very strange question, actually, because the U.S. is our lead ally, and we build on a relationship which we will talk about now, Mr. President. But it's of high relevance, and I'm very happy that we have Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense.
Right.
So this is a very strong tie.
But it was a question about ally in the tariff situation specifically.
Tariff situation?
Yes.
Oh. Well, that's we're talking about a little bit different subject then. We're talking about a different type of ally. No, in this case, he would be very much inclined to be an ally of Norway because he wants to make the best business deal possible, and Norway And the Norwegians are great business people. They're great traders. They're great, very smart nation, very well-managed nation. Has been for a long time, and in particular now with this leadership. But we'll be talking about trade and other things, and I think we're going to come to a conclusion very quickly.
Mr. Prime Minister, I was wondering whether you think that Donald Trump, for his effort in Ukraine and otherwise, deserves to be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, I salute President Trump for having been taking very important initiatives to get this conflict towards an end, which both parties deserve. We need to have a ceasefire, save lives, move towards something which is more secure for Europe, for the people concerned. And on that we work together. And I look forward to go into some details, because we are at a critical moment. On that price, that is a committee taking care of that, which is completely working on its own terms, and I cannot comment on that.
Mr. President, but thank you very much for that question. I like that question. Yeah, please.
A question on China. Can you clarify with whom the U.S. is speaking with China? They're saying it's fake news that trade talks are happening.
Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is. We may reveal it later, but they had meetings this morning, and we've been meeting with China. And so I think you have, Jeff, as usual, I think you have your reporting wrong. Thank you very much. We'll see you. We'll see you inside. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Thank you. Everybody else. Thank you.
President Trump with Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre doing a wonderful job on this bilateral meeting coming from that luncheon, and we will soon be going to the Oval Office for further meetings. Look at that beautiful day at the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, truly the people's house. It is your museum, a residence for the first family, and also a workplace. So I hope you get those summer trips all lined up and consider going to Washington, D.C. It's truly the premier federal capital, and all that history. And what I love about it so much are the ornate monuments with all the light on them in the evenings. It's a beautiful time to enjoy this great country in our golden era, thanks to President Trump. Nearly 100 days in office. Can you imagine it now? It has been really like Christmas Day every day with President Trump back at the helm, with this cabinet in place. As you saw there, Susie Wiles, his incredible chief of staff, the first woman to hold that position, but also Secretary Scott Bessent of the Treasury and Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, doing an extraordinary job to work peace through strength and the MAGA agenda on a global level, to restructure the supply line chains and also to restructure our economy so that the American dollar can be strong once again, so that it can be working for you, the American people. And in the short term, although there's been questions over tariffs and some concern and fears, because of these tariffs, you have 18 to now 34 nations have either directly reached out to the White House or are promising to come to renegotiate all of these different trade deals. And the Kingdom of Norway, really crucial to all of this. And as President Trump said, their amazing work at reforming NATO, but also the work to renegotiate things throughout Europe, and those Scandinavian, those Nordic countries really remaining very independent in many ways, well managed, and they, in so many ways, have been able to put their nations, their countries first, and beautiful places to travel to as well. So a great partnership between the United States and the Kingdom of Norway as President Trump and Prime Minister Støre get down to business in the West Wing. Always good to see these bilateral discussions. He is now the 13th foreign leader to meet with President Trump at the White House in the first 100 days. And we were anticipating President Trump's first international trip to be in Saudi Arabia or the Kingdom of the United Kingdom. So either one of those two great kingdoms. But of course, with the passing of His Holiness Pope Francis, things changing in the schedule, President Trump will be traveling to the Eternal City of Rome, Italy, and specifically the Vatican City, which it's a country in and of itself. So the smallest nation on earth, actually, sitting within the Roman Eternal City there. So it will be a great celebration of a world leader's life, bringing together people from all over this great world of ours. So whether it be pilgrims or world leaders, pray for everyone's peaceful passage in order to celebrate the life of His Holiness Pope Francis. To reflect upon all of that, as the cardinals have been coming together for this ceremonial 9 days of mourning during the Easter season. And then they will be going into a conclave after that. That is the secret meeting. They give up all their personal items, their cell phones, and they go to elect the next pontiff. So when that does happen, you will see all those votes go up in smoke. If there's white smoke, habemus papam, as they say, we have a pope. If not, you'll see that grayish, almost black smoke, meaning another round of voting. So that'll be forthcoming after the funeral, of course, of Pope Francis on Saturday. So we'll stay on that here on Right Side Broadcasting Network, as it's major world news that is shaping the world as we are speaking right now on this beautiful Easter Thursday for you. I'm Robert McNeely. It's a pleasure to be with you if you're just joining us right now. Thank you to our sponsors at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live, angelpaste.com. Experience the miracle today, whether it's the vitamin B miracle cream that takes care of your dry skin, or if it's the orange immunity option that's infused with vitamin C. Again, non-GMOs, no chemicals in any of these great products. Also, a facial spray or even a mosquito repellent, all natural for you. They're based in Spring, Texas, in the Lone Star State, just off of the Gulf of America, and Christian-owned, and they also hire veterans. So angelpaste.com. Experience the miracle today. Thank you for sponsoring us at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live, and Kalshi.com/RSBN. Who will be the Canadian Prime Minister after the next election come the fall? Will it be someone from the Liberal Party or the Conservative Party? Of course, we have interviewed Ruby Dalla, who ran to replace Trudeau, the governor of Canada, as President Trump aptly jokes around. But who knows? Maybe Canada will become that 51st state in the next few months. Trade live now on these important questions facing our country and our continent. Who will be the Canadian Prime Minister after the next election? Scan that QR code now. Trade live and bet today at Kalshi.com/RSBN. KALSHI. It's Kalshi.com/RSBN. Thank you for sponsoring us here at RSBN. And we're so proud to be on the right side of history as President Trump meets with the Norwegian Prime Minister, Mr. Støre, as they are talking on big bilateral agreements, trade, tariffs, everything facing the Western world and Western civilization as a whole. The 13th foreign leader to the White House since President Trump took the oath of office on January 20th, and it has been so welcomed compared to the autopen presidency of Joe Biden. And what a beautiful day it is on this holy Easter Thursday. The green emerald layout of the White House, President Trump pledging, you might have saw him on the grounds yesterday, looking to locate two nice spots for two new flagpoles. This president always nonstop. He will be funding it himself to put on the White House. And as we saw, he's restored the Oval Office, very ornate, with 20 portraits of former American presidents and leaders that helped shape this great nation, both Republican and Democrat, or the gold ornate nature of the Oval Office now. The FIFA World Cup, which will be battled for in the United States, with the premier city hosting Atlanta, Georgia, will be doing that, but also we'll be having some tournaments in, I believe, New Jersey, all the way down here in Alabama, as well as other sites, as the world will come to play for that premier soccer title next year. President Trump has that FIFA World Cup in the Oval Office, and it's a cool one. If you see, it opens up with a key, so you can keep it flat. You can open it up as it is right now in the Oval Office, almost like an accordion, the way it stretches out, but it's all gold. And of course, the new model of Air Force One, which might be premiering during the presidency of Donald Trump. So we have that on the desk as well. Maybe we'll get a highlight of that as we see some of the Oval Office meeting between President Trump and the Norwegian Prime Minister forthcoming. Some of the other great events happening this week, if you missed it, the Easter egg roll was on Monday. This is a great event for staff and family members and for all those, open to everyone throughout the country and really throughout the world, if you'd like to visit the grounds of the White House for this event dating back to the 19th century, really becoming popular when Rutherford B. Hayes was in office in 1878. And ever since the Reagan administration, really the responsibilities and duties of that event going more towards the First Lady's office, although the President and the First Lady both participate in the rolling of the eggs. And since 1981, each family, each child participating in this fun day on Easter Monday, getting an ornate collectible of 5 wooden eggs. So something exciting to see for those who will be enjoying that perhaps next year as well. So that was a great celebration on Easter Monday. Of course, First Lady Melania Trump reading a book to those wonderful students at the White House. And then I usually don't do this, but I got into a Facebook battle with someone because someone was talking about their great day there and how wonderful it was. And I just wanted to defend how great First Lady Melania Trump is. So it was very exciting to catch all of that live here on the right side of history. We'll go live to the West Wing now for you. President Trump meeting with the Norwegian Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. We have Jonas Gahr Støre here, who is as you know, the Prime Minister of Norway. He's a great gentleman, highly respected, beloved in his country. And we've had talks on the war with Ukraine and Russia and trade. We're doing very well, I think, on both. We've had some pretty good movement in every respect. The war is very important that it ends with, I used to say, 2,500 people a week dying, young people, mostly soldiers from Russia and Ukraine. And we want to end that war. We want to end it quickly. And I think we've made a lot of progress. And we'll see what happens. This next few days is going to be very important. Meetings are taking place right now. Additionally, we talked about trade, and we get along very well on trade. We'll do something, but I think the Prime Minister knows that over the years the United States has been very good to a lot of people, and it's time for us to benefit also. So we're going to have a good relationship on trade, and we discussed other things also. But Mr. Prime Minister, it's an honor to have you at the White House. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. This year is 200 years since the first immigration from Norway to the U.S. We come here early in your term. Appreciate that you take time. We have highlighted that very close cooperation. We are allies. We look after security in the north, in the Arctic. A lot of confidence between our services. We have discussed in detail the war in Ukraine. I have saluted the President for his initiative to make progress towards something that can be a ceasefire and an end to this terrible conflict. It is a complex picture, but it needs political will and push, and we have exchanged ideas on that. And then I think the President and his team have been open to hear our perspectives. And on trade, we have also emphasized that we can benefit, both of us, by trading. We can be complementary, and we can find good solutions. But first of all, I appreciate, Mr. President, the spirit and the tone of this conversation, which has been confirmation of a very strong partnership.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any questions?
Can I ask you
Yes.
first, Mr. President, have you spoken about the tariffs that you want to impose on Norway? Is there a chance that you can lower?
We spoke about trade, and we understand each other very well. I think we'll have no problem.
You think that you will get an agreement?
I think we'll have no problem whatsoever with Norway.
Mr. President, have you discussed a possible visit to Norway? Did you discuss a possible visit for President Trump?
We didn't, but I love it. I mean, I've been there, and it is a beautiful place. They have
But I told the president that, he is receiving us early in the term. He's welcome to visit Norway. We would like to have him, and it will be another way of emphasizing this strong friendship.
Mr. President, Norway has been a staunch supporter of Ukraine since the Russian invasion in 2022. Has something been discussed here today that may have altered your views on things?
No, we want to, very simply, I have no allegiance to anybody. I have allegiance to saving lives, and I want to save a lot of lives. A lot of young people, mostly young people. It's the war. It's the soldiers, and if we can do that, also, as you know, I got started because the money that's been spent on this war is insane. It should have never happened, and it would have never happened if I were president. But Biden spent $350 billion on this, and it's a shame, and that's what got me involved. And then I looked at, and I see the results. It's horrible. It's a killing field. 5,000 soldiers a week on average, and we want to stop that. We both want to stop that for a lot of reasons, but I would say that is my number one reason.
Why do you think that we will get Russia to accept a deal that also Ukraine and Europe is willing to?
I think so, yeah. I do. I believe they will accept, and I think we're going to get this over with. I hope so, soon.
You continue to lack support from NATO allies in your goal of obtaining Greenland. How will you proceed if you don't get that support?
Well, Greenland's going to be interesting, but that's for another day. I think we need that for international peace.
What are you expecting of your
And
allies?
if you don't have that, I think it's a big threat to our world. So I think Greenland's very important for international peace. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Mr. President, this morning in Truth Social Post, you used the words, Vladimir, stop. That seemed like a slightly different message, a personal message. What is your level of frustration with President Putin?
I didn't like last night. I wasn't happy with it. And we're in the midst of talking peace, and missiles were fired. And I was not happy with it. That's what I meant, and that's, what it said. I assume that's what you mean.
Sorry.
Yeah.
If the bombs keep falling, will you consider additional sanctions toward Russia, or what will you do if President Putin...
I'd rather answer that question in a week. I want to see if we can have a deal. No reason to answer it now, but I won't be happy. Let me put it that way. Things will happen.
Mr. President, why are you not putting more pressure on Russia? I know a lot of Europeans...
Putting a lot of pressure. You don't know what pressure I'm putting on Russia. They're dealing. You have no idea what pressure I'm putting on Russia. We're putting a lot of pressure.
Can you maybe tell us that?
We're putting a lot of pressure on Russia, and Russia knows that, and some people that are close to it know, or he wouldn't be talking right now. The Prime Minister understands that better than anybody. He wouldn't be talking right now. He's talking, and we're putting a lot of pressure. I think he wants to make a deal. We're going to find out very soon, but it takes two to tango, and you have to have Ukraine want to make a deal too, and they're being hit very hard, and I do believe they want to make a deal.
Mr. President,
you said that the Ukraine have to give some territory to win peace, among them Crimea. Do you stand by that? And I know that the former NATO General Secretary today has told you that he does not agree, and he believes in territorial integrity of the Ukraine. How will you deal with that with your allies? And do you stand by that Ukraine have to give?
Former Secretary General happens to be right here, so they can't put words in his mouth. He's been a great general, frankly. It was because that's what you are. Really, you're a general. But he's been a great Secretary General. We had a tremendous relationship, very successful, and I think he could speak for himself. He's right here.
But do you still agree that Ukraine have to give some territory away to win peace?
Well, it depends what territory. They've been fighting. They've lost a lot of territory. And we'll do the best we can. Working with Ukraine, we'll do the best we can. But they lost a lot of territory. When you say Crimea, that was handed over during a president named Barack Hussein Obama. That had nothing to do with me, Crimea. That was 11 years ago with Obama. And they made a decision. There wasn't a bullet fired. There was no fighting. There was no anything. They just handed it over. Now they say, well, can you get it back? I think that's going to be a very difficult thing to do. That was given by Barack Obama when he was president, not by Donald Trump.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President,
you have a peace proposal that you put on the table. It's a 30-day ceasefire proposal. Your national security team presented it to both Ukraine and Russia. 2 months ago, Ukraine agreed to that ceasefire proposal immediately. Russia has not. And my question is Russia the obstacle to peace based upon that, just getting to that 30-day ceasefire?
I don't think so. I think that they both want peace right now. They're ready to do something. We'll see what happens. Complicated, very complicated. But I think they are both very much looking to make a deal. Marco, what would you say?
Well, first of all, what was put before our partners was options to discuss about things that it would take to end a war. This war is endable. Both sides just have to agree to it. We've shown them a pathway forward. We've discussed those ideas. It was a good meeting yesterday. There'll be good meetings over the weekend. We've shown them the finish line. We need both of them to say yes. But what happened last night with those missile strikes should remind everybody of why this war needs to end. It's horrible those missiles landed. What's even worse is there are today people that were alive yesterday that are not alive today because this war continues, and the president wants to stop it. And everyone should be thanking the president for being a peacemaker and trying to save lives. That's what we're trying to do here. It's not our war. We didn't start it, as you know. But we're trying to end the dying. We're trying to end the destruction. And we've shown the path forward. We can see the finish line, but both of them have to get there. We're going to do everything we can to help them get there, but they have to ultimately say yes. Both
and we are using a lot of pressure on both. You know, if you think we're just in there because we're nice people, and we are nice people, but we're using a lot of pressure on both.
What concessions, Mr. President, and to your national security team, what concessions has Russia offered up thus far to get to the point where you're closer to peace?
Stopping the war, taking the whole country. Pretty big concession.
Mr. President, if you are going to take down the tariffs, what do you want Norway to buy more of from the U.S.?
To buy more? Well, you don't need snow. You don't need skis. You don't need ski champions either, right? You have a lot of them. We just want to keep the relationship the way it is. We've had a great relationship. I think now maybe closer than ever, but we've had a great relationship with Norway. I think just keep it the way it is, kid. You can't do better.
Really? Not even by, say,
well, if they want to give us some additional concessions, that's okay. You can't do much better. Yes,
Mr.
yes.
President, you had a long meeting with Norway today. You said that Norway is doing a lot of things right, but on the Ukraine, if I can ask both you and the Prime Minister, did you find common ground today on Ukraine and the peace plan?
Totally. It's totally common ground. The Prime Minister can speak about it, but I can just say he wants to see people stop dying more than anything else, and he'd like to see it end. He's going to help us end it.
Mr. President, can I say that to move towards an end of this war, U.S. engagement is critical, and President Trump made that possible. That is clear. That is obvious. It's really happening. Now, the important thing is that both parties have to know that they have to deliver, and they have to feel the pressure to deliver. Ukraine is under attack. They are defending themselves. Lives are being lost. And we believe very firmly that there needs to be a ceasefire, the initiative taken by the U.S. Some time ago. It needs to be respected. And then to move on to something which both parties can own. That is the complicated part in such a dramatic war. And here I believe Europeans and Americans working together, as we do much closer now. I salute the team of President Trump of being, open in that process. We had a good discussion on this today, and then we have to move on, and we cannot lose time because this is too much drama happening. One thing is people losing their lives, but it is a bad thing for Europe, and it's a bad thing for the world to having such a broad conflict going on. It can have ramifications far beyond Ukraine.
Mr. President, follow-up question on China. Mr. President, I forgot my question. I wanted to ask about.
It's all right. That happens to
it happens sometimes. Yeah. No, Mr. President, I wanted to ask about the. Zelensky has said that he wants more Patriot missiles. So far, has been no response from the United States. If you and the United States decides to pull out of negotiating for peace, trying to broker peace, does that also mean a no on Patriot missiles, a no on sharing intelligence with Ukraine?
Let's see what happens. I think we're going to make a deal. And if we make a deal, that'll be wonderful. We won't have to worry about your question. You can ask that question in 2 weeks, and we'll see. But I think we're getting very close. The Prime Minister feels the same way, and we'll hopefully not have to answer that question.
You said once the President...
Mr. President, Norway is the third country to be officially invited to the White House after Liberation Day. Why did you invite Norway so soon to the White House?
Because I like them. And I like your Prime Minister, and I like the way your government runs, and I respect the King. He's highly respected in Norway. It's a great thing. Not an easy thing to do. He's done a great job. Yeah.
Would you like an invitation to visit the King?
Absolutely. You get me that invitation.
I just told the President he's welcome to visit Norway.
President Trump, the first life farm,
you said before that you like the Norwegian Petroleum Fund, and I'm wondering if that has been up for discussion today, the way that infrastructure are running and whether...
Well, this fund was created in the late 1990s to save for future generations the income from oil and gas. Norwegians should continue to work as hard, dedicated, innovate and move forward, despite having these incomes, which we happen to be in the period of our history where we can harvest, and we have transferred that into investments, half of them, by the way, here in the United States. So I think this is a model which we have been able to explore. If we can share experiences, and we do with our colleagues in the US, you never copy this one-to-one, but there can be techniques and way of working that we have used in organizing our fund. Jens Stoltenberg was the finance minister when the first dollar entered that fund. So he is a safe hand to have as a finance minister today. What do you say?
No, and as you said, Mr. Prime Minister, we are ready to sit down with the US to also work with them on if they want to establish a sovereign wealth fund, because we have a good experience with our fund. And I think that one example of how we work together with the United States is that half of the fund, close to $1 trillion are invested in the United States, mainly in equity, but also some in fixed income, including government bonds. So this is an expression of trust in the United States, expressed by the strong investment of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Then just briefly on Ukraine, since it was mentioned, we had a very good and extensive discussion about Ukraine, the path forward to peace. And as the Prime Minister said, we commend the US for pushing forward to try to find a negotiated solution. At the same time, we need to continue to support Ukraine, and therefore I'm proud that Norway has actually tripled the military support to Ukraine, and this year we will allocate close to $8 billion to Ukraine. That will strengthen them and also their hand on the negotiating table.
If I may add to that, if there's a peace, and there will be a peace, we have a common responsibility in securing democratic Ukraine for the future, and the best security guarantee they can have is the ability to defend themselves, and we are investing in that.
Mr. Prime Minister,
Mr. President, as it relates to tariffs, Mr. President, when you unveiled your reciprocal tariffs on April the 2nd, the tariff rate for Norway was 15%. Based upon your conversations that you've had today with the Prime Minister, do you see that tariff rate coming down from what you proposed just a few weeks ago?
Well, they have a great fund of $2 trillion. It's a big fund, and they don't have any debt. So I think they'd probably be willing to pay us more than that, I hope.
Are the two nations in agreement?
Mr. President,
Yes.
in 2018, your former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called for an end to Russian occupation of Crimea. Why has this administration changed its stance on territorial concessions for Crimea?
Well, the war started. It would have never started if I were president. This is a war that is horrible. All wars are horrible. This one is in particular bad. And I don't know that you can ever say there's going to be a winner to this, because so many lives have been lost. Not only soldiers, a lot of lives have been lost. I think that we want to do one very simple thing. It would have never happened if I were president. Zero chance it was going to, and it didn't. You know, people say, how do you know that? Number one, it didn't happen. We never even discussed it. I would talk to Putin about it. It was the apple of his eye. You know, Ukraine was the apple of Putin's eye, but there was never even a thought that he'd go in. And I think he understood that I would not be happy if he did. And it was only when I got out, and you know, when you mention what happened to Ukraine years ago under President Obama and a vice president that was also president later, unfortunately for this country, what happened is large chunks of land were given up, and it was called Crimea, and that was a big thing. That was a big moment. But this isn't my war. This is Biden's war. This is a war that Biden was president when this war happened. But I'm trying to put out the fire, and I think we'll be successful. And if we do, we're going to save a lot of lives. Otherwise, and the Prime Minister had a statement. He said, this is just a point in time. We're very lucky because this is a point. And if this doesn't happen, this could go on for a long time.
Mr. President, will you have meetings with other world leaders when you're in Rome, sir?
Future Democrat president?
I don't think he will. I think he wants to make peace. I think he wants to end it. And I feel pretty confident of that. But we're gonna know pretty soon.
Mr. President, will you have meetings with other world leaders when you're in Rome?
Yes, I will.
Which leaders do you want to meet, sir?
Well, I'd like to meet them all. That would be nice. I'd like to take care of all of them. But we have many of them there, and they all want to meet. They want to meet about trade. And we are making some great inroads and great deals. You might want to speak about that, Mr. Secretary.
We had a very successful bilateral meeting with the Republic of South Korea today. We may be moving faster than I thought, and we will be talking technical terms as early as next week as we reach an agreement on understanding as soon as next week. So South Koreans came early. They came with their A game, and we will see if they follow through on that.
President Trump, you're rounding up your first 100 days.
Do you think you deserve the Nobel Peace Prize if you manage to create
Do I deserve the Nobel Peace?
If you manage to create peace?
Well, maybe for the Abraham Accords. I don't want to get ahead of myself on this one, but they say for the Abraham Accords. And by the way, speaking of that, we're going to be filling it up. A lot of countries want to come into the Abraham Accords. You know, we have 4. And Biden did nothing on that one, too. It's the same 4. But they're great countries, and they were brave doing it, and it's worked out very well. And we're going to be filling up the Abraham Accords. They're going to be, I think, filling it up very rapidly.
Mr. President,
could you say something about that?
There's great, enormous opportunity to grow the Abraham Accords. But I would just point to one thing. Of all the leaders in the world today, no leader is working harder to prevent wars or end them than President Trump is right now. That's why we're talking to Iran. That's why we're engaged with Ukraine and Russia. It's the desire to prevent these wars from breaking out and to end the ones that exist already. And again, I just think it's tremendous for our country to be led by a president who desires to bring peace and establish peace and protect peace. So it's hard work.
Mr. President, you know, Marco just mentioned something that maybe we should talk about for just a second, if we could, Mr. Prime Minister. And you're involved in it, too, because you've been involved in the world and peace. But I think we're doing very well with respect to Iran, and we're having very serious meetings. And there are only 2 options, and the one option is not a good option. It's not a good option at all. And I think we're doing very well on an agreement with Iran. But that one, we're doing a lot of things, I will say. But that one is well on its way. We could have a very, very good decision, and a lot of lives will be saved.
Mr. President, on the economy, there was a slowdown as it relates to home sales in the month of March, the slowest pace since 2009. Is that an economic indicator, and perhaps the Treasury Secretary can weigh in on this as well, is that an economic indicator that concerns you about the broader U.S. economy?
No, they had very good numbers on housing today, extremely good numbers, and that's despite interest rates, because, you know, if you look at what happened, everyone said, oh, I said I was going to get prices down. I did. Energy just hit $1.98 in a couple of states. It's way down. Energy's down, and we're about $64 a barrel. When I came in, and we were looking at $89, $90, $95. And by the way, that helps us solve the war, too. Having those energy prices is a big a big incentive for Russia to also agree with solving the war problem. Groceries are down. When I was with you 2 months ago, you were complaining about eggs. I said, I just got here. I was here for about a week when the press started saying about eggs have gone through the roof. I said, I just got here. Tell me about eggs. And they happened. They went through the roof and you couldn't get them. So we just had a big Easter egg hunt at the White House. Thousands and thousands of eggs. And the price was down 87%. So we did a great job. Housing is doing very well. We should lower interest rates. That's the Fed. I hope they lower interest rates. That's a smart thing to do. Be ahead a little bit, although already it's a little bit late. But in the end, we just have a great country. We have a very strong country, and we have every other country. I can't think of one country that doesn't want to negotiate a deal. And they either negotiate a deal or we set a deal that we think is fair. Because we don't have to go through all of these. It would be physically impossible. You know, you have so many people that really understand it, which is a very small group of people here. And we are going to, at some point, just set prices for deals. Some will be tariffed. Some treated us very unfairly. They'll be tariffed higher than others. But we've been ripped off for many, many years. The United States has been ripped off like no country probably in the history of the world has been ripped off for 45, 50 years. And countries have gotten rich by doing that with the United States. We've taken care of their militaries, and military is another subject we talk about. We're not going to make that subject to any of the deals, but you know the same countries that I do where we virtually take care of their military and then don't get treated fairly on trade. So the people, and I don't blame those countries, I blame the people that sat at that beautiful desk right behind you, because those people didn't do the job for this country. And they let us lose $4 billion a day on trade. We were losing $4 or $5 billion a day on trade when I got here. And now we're going to be much better than breaking even. And we're going to be making $4 or $5 billion a day on trade. So, I don't blame any country, not the worst of them. We were abused by countries. I blame the President of the United States that happened to be sitting when these deals were made. Disgraceful. When I was here, we had a great 4 years. We had the most successful economy in the history of our country, my first term. And we were very tough on trade. And with China, as you know, they paid hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs. But nobody else ever did that. China paid not 10 cents to any other president. And but not only China, virtually every country got away with murder. And we just can't let that happen. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Head out. Please start moving. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, press. Head out. Let's go. Thank you. Keep going. Keep moving. Thank you. Thank you, press.
One little mistake. One mistake.
Al, thank you.
Many topics discussed there with President Trump and the Norwegian Prime Minister, also Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent on hand for all of that, just reiterating their great relationship, the Norwegian Kingdom and the United States of America, working together on bilateral agreements with trade, tariffs, and all of the above. And President Trump is saying he just wants to strengthen what's already good there. But lots coming into discussions with the Chinese Communist Party, also the tariff situation with South Korea and trade deals with them, among others, including Marco Rubio's statements on reiterating how President Trump is upset by Vladimir Putin's continued strikes against Ukraine, and that this is not our war, but we want it to come to an end. We want peace in that region. Thank you to our sponsors at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live, Colonial Metals Group. Paul Stone, the great CEO, would like you to shield your savings today. So scan the QR code now or go to freegoldguy.com/RSBN so important for you to do, whether it's properties or assets, a 401k or IRA. Adding gold and silver to your portfolio is of the essence. freegoldguy.com/RSBN. Thank you to Colonial Metals Group for sponsoring Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. And Tax Network USA Incorporated. Do not delay. Call today, 800-357-1415. Settle those back taxes now and protect yourself from the IRS. TNUSA.com/RSBN. TNUSA.com/RSBN, your go-to for Patriot experts when it comes to property and state and federal income taxes. Again, reach out today so you can settle those back taxes. Thank you for sponsoring us at Right Side Broadcasting Network and freetrumpbook.com. The ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, and his team bringing you this exclusive, wonderful gift, whether it's a stocking stuffer or a great birthday gift for the kids. All you have to pay for is shipping and handling. The Kids Guide to President Trump and the Kids Guide to the Courage of President Trump. Great topics to learn from our history, including women's suffrage or civil rights, or why we went into a bloody and horrific civil war for 4 years. All of that can be answered with the freetrumpbook.com. A great stocking stuffer, a great gift for the summertime as well, for your kiddos at home or that neighbor who just doesn't want to pay attention. So freetrumpbook.com. Thank you to Ambassador Mike Huckabee for not only serving this great nation of ours, but providing such a great gift for kids where they might not learn otherwise in school. freetrumpbook.com. Thank you for sponsoring us at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. And our thoughts and prayers again with the Holy See, as President Trump will be traveling to Italy and Vatican City come Saturday for the funeral of Pope Francis on Saturday morning. Get all America First updates and exclusive offers at rsbnetwork.com/newsletter. Also, we are thinking and praying for everyone in the Florida State community and family members as they faced horror last week come Good Friday with the shootings that take place there. And we think about everyone who suffers from different acts of violence. And the only way to turn away from that is, again, turning this nation back to God. But we had those great conversations this week, whether it be with Father Frank Pavone, among many others, talking about the hope that's there in this golden era of America. And that's what we do on the Right Side of History here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. We are your go-to live desk for all things America First, inside and outside of the Beltway, pertaining to President Trump, Vice President Vance, and of course, your 119th Congress, as you, the American people, put a constitutional government back into the United States just last November, on November 5th, in fact, of 2024. A live shot of the loveliest village on the plains, of course, Auburn, Alabama, home to RSBN and the great Auburn University. Well, we might have a live shot here of Prime Minister Storer leaving the White House momentarily. Great meetings today. President Trump having a luncheon with him, and also a bilateral meeting, of course, in the Oval Office, which you just saw a playback of that, and reporters getting another press conference. This is the most transparent administration in American history. So exciting to see that as the Suburban is awaiting the great Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Norway. And it was all smiles and great discussion between the two leaders, something we did not necessarily see with Zelensky when he was in town, but really 13 different leaders visiting President Trump, Bibi Netanyahu of Israel visiting twice, in fact. And it usually does go like that, all smiles and celebrations, even though these are tough conversations because we're realigning global trade. Not an easy thing to do with $36 trillion in debt, but President Trump fixing the mess that was given to him by people like Bill Clinton and George W. Bush and Barack Hussein Obama, and that auto pen of auto pens, the sleepy Joe Biden. Oh my goodness gracious, what a mess to fix, but there is such a man for this in such a time of history for a golden era and a revival. And it's the man who penned to paper the art of the deal, the art of the comeback, none other than the boy from Queens who became the man in Manhattan, who hit all of those tabloids. Think about all of those great appearances in television and film. A man who lived larger than life to humbly come down his golden escalator in order to make America great again. And my critics out there might say, well, oh my goodness, speaking glowingly of Donald Trump. Well, why not? Because this is someone who did not need the job. He's, again, putting his money to placing 2 flagpoles at the White House because he wants to reinstitute patriotism. He loves this country. You could see it in the Oval Office. You could see it with his team of cabinet members who also did not need the headache, did not need the jobs, many of them leaving millions of dollars in contracts on television. I can tell you it's a fun job to have, but they instead went to serving the people. They want to be part of this revival, and they have the resumes to do so. And I think about people like Pete Hegseth, who gets just destroyed by the media on a regular basis, dealing with fake news stories about Signal and pontificating that it was classified information shared when it was not. And he was within the purview of doing his constitutional authority at the Pentagon. Oh, and then we learned, too, of the leakers that perpetuated that. So they have been terminated because they failed at their positions, and then they act as if it's somehow Secretary Hegseth's fault in that situation. We keep hearing the narrative on the other side, but that's why we exist here at Right Side Broadcasting Network Live as your go-to live desk to set the record straight, to be on the right side of history, and to give credit where credit's due, but also criticize when the mainstream media seeks to create stories. We're not going to hide behind a veil of ignorance. We're going to be at the forefront of this, sharing with you not only our political commentary and analysis. Yes, we have a bias. Yes, we are wanting to make America great again and wanting to see the Trump administration and agenda succeed because it's common sense policies that are making this economy and this country strong again and revered again, both in being feared but also respected. And you need both at the global level. And President Trump is the great balance between those two to really bring about this great golden era in a new American century, being a superpower that does not have to worry about its debt being bought up by and controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. He's restructuring and reshaping all of it and doing it with a smile on his face, often with many jokes, and giving the media unbridled access to him, the 47th Commander-in-Chief. And just yesterday, honoring those great soldiers from roughly 10 to 15 years ago, serving in the same platoon together, over half of their unit receiving a Medal of Honor and Purple Heart awards given their bravery. And you saw them in the Oval Office saying we would do it all over again. These men who don't have limbs because of what they went through, either being shot or falling on IEDs, defending those who have so graciously given time to serve and selflessly serve this great nation. We see the Marines coming out there, so that might mean moments away from President Trump saying goodbye to the Norwegian Prime Minister, enjoying lunch this afternoon with staff and cabinet members, including Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, also Secretary Bessent of Treasury, Secretary Rubio of the Department of State as well. And who has logged more miles for this administration than Secretary Rubio himself, doing an extraordinary job with the Peace Through Strength and MAGA agenda mandated by President Trump just since January 20th of this year. We're approaching that 100-day mark and should have some wonderful programming to celebrate all of that. And we'll be announcing that forthcoming in the coming days as we celebrate this greatness happening at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. We have not had a modern president quite like Donald Trump, the citizen servant who, again, came down that golden escalator with First Lady Melania Trump in order to make America safe again, make America wealthy again, make America strong again, then teaming up with Secretary Kennedy to make America healthy again, the great conservative Republican and liberal Democrat traditions coming together to save this country from the deep state far left globalists. In that endorsement last fall at the Turning Point USA event, with the fireworks behind it, it's an image of two great families, the Trumps and the Kennedys, coming together to save this country. and ultimately to make America great again. And he is doing so with now 13 different foreign leaders, major countries in this world, coming to the table to meet with President Trump in the West Wing to talk on a number of different issues, from geopolitical issues to tariffs to new trade deals, also to securing the West. And that's why this important meeting was happening with the Kingdom of Norway, because I'm sure Greenland was discussed. Also, safety in the North Atlantic. Those waters are patrolled by just about everyone who has an interest and stake in the game. So the Russians, the Chinese come through those waters. Same with the Americans, the UK, and also those Norwegian vessels as well. This is why it's so important by the end of the year, if not sooner, for Greenland to become part of the United States, whether as a territory or as another state, because we have our bases there, and just as Alaska helps the Pacific Fleet to keep us safe, especially during the Cold War, the same goes for Greenland and the strategic nature of that body mass in the North Atlantic. Very crucial for the future safety of the United States and the Western world, and NATO in favor of this as well. But Norway has been such a great kingdom and helpful to the United States in restructuring NATO, its mission, and making sure that all of the member states pay their fair share, so that the United States is not simply footing the bill as it was under Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Hussein Obama, and Otto Penn Joe Biden, the living predecessors of President Trump. Ultimately, it's not so much Republican and Democrat, and that's what we emphasize on the show here. And as you see from the press conferences to the meetings and to the unbridled access to the speeches and President Trump's own words from his lips to our ears, it's we the people versus a bloated government bureaucracy, globalists who really have failed this country. And the living predecessors of President Trump did not do it well. They instead got rich. They aligned their own pockets with their buddies and their own personal interests over the nation. And President Trump is the antithesis of those living predecessors. And thank God for that, because they put the United States really on a dangerous path in the last 25 years, perhaps two of the worst decisions being bringing China into the World Trade Organization. And they've been violating every term and every agreement on an international stage since 2000, when then President Bill Clinton and the Otto Penn, then Senator Joe Biden of Delaware, welcoming Xi Jinping in with clanking those champagne glasses when he was the vice premier of the Chinese Communist Party, now ruling with an iron fist more than ever before. Or it was the entirely terrible strategy with flawed intelligence coming from the George W. Bush administration to enter Iraq. And that was really, in hindsight, an awful move. There were no weapons of mass destruction. So it does not really matter whether Republican or Democrat. The living predecessors of President Trump were just awful for this country. And it's good to have a common sense leadership back in the West Wing with a cabinet, again, who do not need these positions. Their expertise leading to a new nation based in American greatness, putting us first and asking those appropriate questions. And you can remember dating back to 1987, some of our viewers here seeing President Trump when he was around my age, literally on Oprah Winfrey's show saying, like, Oprah, we can't do this anymore. And we know from his great books, like Letters to Trump, she said she wanted to run with him and fix these problems until he actually did it himself. And then she wanted to stay with the globalist, and he in turn decided to stay with you, the American people. And as he detailed in Letters to Trump, that he just misses her so much. Oprah, she'd love to come have that turkey sandwich and a couple of slices of key lime pie when she would visit Mar-a-Lago. And that sounds good to me just after this lunch hour. I could always go for some key lime pie and a great turkey sandwich, and ideally at Mar-a-Lago. As we are looking at a live shot that is the entrance to the West Wing, President Trump is meeting with Norwegian Prime Minister Støre, and they've had a great conversation, whether it be over lunch with both staffs there and cabinet members. in conjunction with the great leaders of these two fantastic nations. But then, of course, you saw playback from the Oval Office on a number of different topics and questions that the in-town press pool had for President Trump and the Norwegian Prime Minister of that great kingdom. So also, Norwegian Prime Minister mentioning that he'd like to have President Trump, along with the King of Norway, inviting President Trump to that great nation. So that might be forthcoming as well. The first international trip will be taking place in the coming hours as President Trump will visit Italy, specifically Vatican City in the Eternal City of Rome, to honor the life and legacy of the Pontiff, His Holiness Pope Francis, as the world will come together to remember that this weekend. In addition to that weekend activities, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said more conversations will be happening with the rogue regime of Iran. This is about denuclearization, also where they stand in this global world, a Middle East that is putting peace through strength as a priority after the horrible Hamas terrorist attacks that took place back on October 7th of 2023. President Trump standing firm, reiterating on Truth Social that he is with the state of Israel and saying that him and Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu are nearly 100% together on just about each and every crucial geopolitical issue facing the world, especially the United States and Israel. And of course, the ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, putting that personal note President Trump wrote to the nation into the Western Wall and praying over that. So very good to see that our ties are stronger than ever. President Trump reiterating today with the Kingdom of Norway that our ties are also perhaps stronger than ever. So it's good to see a foreign policy that actually works for the American people, where people don't have to fear if a nuclear missile will go off, something that I thought about over the last 4 years of the Otto Penn administration. The cognitive decline of Joe Biden brought many fears, and no one really knew who was in charge. Was it Dr. Jill? Was it former President Barack Hussein Obama? Who was calling the shots? And as President Trump said on Easter Monday during the Easter egg roll with the Easter Bunny, that no Easter Bunny will get in Trump's way. And it was a fun little moment with whoever was the Easter Bunny that day, putting their hands up, or their paws up to their face, about just that ridiculousness that took place over the course of last year. Imagine that, Otto Penn signing Transgender Visibility Day on Easter Sunday, insulting countless Christians throughout this great nation. Of course, we know what Robert Cardinal Sarah of Guinea thinks about that the transgender agenda is Luciferian in nature. Of course, he is in Rome with the cardinals before the conclave, preparing for the celebration and prayers over the life of Pope Francis. And there is the Norwegian Prime Minister store. We thank him for being in Washington, D.C. to meet with President Trump today over lunch, and then, of course, a meeting in the Oval Office. So we look forward to President Trump perhaps in the near future visiting the Kingdom of Norway at the behest of the Prime Minister. Looks like they had very good, very strong bilateral meetings regarding tariffs, regarding trade deals, also geopolitical security, Greenland, among many other topics. And we look forward to President Trump perhaps meeting with him again in the Kingdom of Norway as he drives away from the West Wing on this beautiful Holy Thursday, Easter Thursday, in the United States of America. Get America First updates and exclusive offers at rsbnetwork.com/newsletter. If you wish to opine, please feel free to write a note into feedback at rsbn.tv. And if you can donate to push this new media agenda of bringing access to your government, to your living rooms. That's our goal here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, because at the end of the day, we want you to make up your own minds about what's happening to this great nation, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's something in between. But we're smiling ear to ear. You could do that by donating at RSBN to 801-801. Text RSBN to 801-801 if you so wish to do that. We love hearing, especially when we're out in the field with folks saying, hey, I donated to RSBN. We're very grateful for that, so we can continue to bring you this decade-long project, which will be going on longer and longer for you, the American people, so that you can have full access to your government that you installed, a constitutional government, back on November 5th of last year. And of course, Auburn, Alabama, the home to not only the premier university in the SEC, it just matters more here. That's Auburn University, a live shot of College of Magnolia. Over Toomer's Corner, where you can buy some memorabilia or perhaps a delicious lemonade, especially as temperatures get warmer in the spring months leading into summer. Congratulations in advance to the graduates forthcoming, whether it be their undergrad or graduate degrees from this great university. They'll be celebrating some graduating on Mother's Day, in fact, coming up on May 11th. So don't forget about Mom coming up in roughly 2 weeks here. Congratulations in advance to the great graduates of this amazing university. For all America First updates and exclusive offers, please feel free to visit rsbnetwork.com/newsletter. And again, feedback at rsbn.tv if you wish to opine. If there's any breaking news, you know where to turn. RSBN Live, we have some great announcements and interesting celebrations forthcoming, especially for next Tuesday. 100 days in office for President Trump and his team. We'll announce that in the future. You'll have Mr. Matthew Alvarez back with you tomorrow as I have a quick little trip, and then I'll see you back on Monday again, unless there's breaking news here at the network. But for all my colleagues, happy Easter Thursday. God bless you. I'm Robert McNeely. Always a joy to be with you on the right side of history. Stay tuned. We will see you very soon. Have a wonderful afternoon, and make sure you spend time with those you love, as we will here at Auburn, Alabama. Thank you for tuning in to Right Side Broadcasting Network Live. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Welcome to Right Side Broadcasting Network, your trusted conservative news outlet. At RSBN, we deliver the truth when the mainstream media falls short. Since 2015, we've proudly broadcasted every single one of President Trump's iconic MAGA rallies, bringing you the excitement and energy live before anyone else. By watching RSBN, you get an unfiltered front row view of the action on the ground. We interview the crowds to give a voice to millions of Americans just like you. We show you President Trump's speeches in their entirety, free from interruptions and censorship. We cover the stories that matter to you with the integrity and passion you deserve. Thank you for choosing RSBN as your home for America First News. Together, we stand strong, united, and informed. So join us and be part of the right side of history.
President Trump is keeping his promises and saving America. And your kids can learn all about it for free with a new Kids Guide to President Trump. This fun guide shows kids all the steps President Trump is taking to put America back on top of the world stage, including building a strong economy, protecting our borders, and negotiating trade deals. It's an exciting way for kids to learn about President Trump's outstanding leadership. Act now and get a free bonus guide, The Courage of the President. Order now at freetrumpbook.com. That's freetrumpbook.com.
Hey y'all, it's Silk from the Diamond and Silk Chit Chat Live Show. Look, don't forget to check me out right here on RSBN Network. Be sure to watch the show on Right Side Broadcasting Network, and I want you to support Right Side Broadcasting Network. Yes, it's imperative that you do so, okay? I look to see y'all soon. Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the next generation of energy drinks, Rev 7. It has no sugar and no caffeine. Instead, Rev 7 uses Go BHB. Go BHB is one of the body's primary ketones, and it provides the most efficient and clean fuel that your body needs. It also helps you stay energized all day with no crashes. Not only that, it produces 3 times more brain energy than sugar, which helps boost your memory, focus, and mental sharpness. It also helps reduce stress and helps balance your mood. Rev 7 does all that while being the best tasting energy drink ever. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% today. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7. For a limited time, you get our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. I drink Rev 7 every day and I absolutely love it, and so will you.